Welcome back to another episode of Comics Rot Your Brain, the show where screenwriters talk about the comic books that we love, mostly from the 1980s. I am one of your hosts. I'm Steven Bagatourian.
And I'm your other host, Chris Derrick.
And Chris, today we have the pleasure of talking about the absolutely magnificently drawn series from Marvel Comics called Cloak and Dagger. And just to be clear, this is not the initial miniseries that came out a couple years earlier. This is going to be the first 4 issues of the ongoing Cloak and Dagger series, written by Bill Mantlo, drawn by Rick Leonardi, inked by Terry Austin, lettered by Ken Bruzenak, colored by Glynis Oliver, edited by Carl Potts, and of course Jim Shooter was the big kahuna, the editor-in-chief. And oh my goodness, Chris, this is some of the most absolutely jaw-dropping Marvel Comics artwork that I have seen in all of the 1980s, and I'm so glad to be revisiting it because this stuff looks so fucking fantastic. I think that Leonardi and Austin have just knocked this out of the park, and I thought it was a visual home run and just like such an amazing fucking just time capsule of comic art evolving. And I think that Rick Leonardi and Terry Austin were way ahead of their time. I can't wait to talk about what they did as well as what Bill Mantlo did on this book. It's a fascinating 4 issues here. Super excited to talk about it today.
So for those who have not read Cloak and Dagger, they are runaway teens from different backgrounds. There's Tyrone Johnson and Tandy Bowen. Tyrone is a shy, stuttering black boy from Boston, and Tandy is a wealthy white girl from Shaker Heights, Ohio. And what happens is they get kidnapped and gain their powers after being injected by synthetic heroin. Cloak can teleport through darkness and trap people in a shadowy void. And Dagger creates light-based energy daggers. And they become vigilantes, fighting crime, especially drug-related villains. And they do this as they're navigating their complex relationship and they struggle with justice, addiction, and survival. And before we get on with the show, if you love this show, please don't forget to hit like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to sign up for our Patreon, which is at patreon.com/Comics Rot Your Brain.
Yes.
Steve, I have to let you know, like, Rick Leonardi is one of my favorite comic artists from this era. Like the work he did on this, the work he did, but mainly also the work he did on Spider-Man 2099. Yes. I just thought this guy was just such a fucking amazing artist. And there's like a fluidity to his style that feels like it's very flowing.
Yes.
And it's cool because of the cape.
Oh my God,
has.
dude, that
it
cape
feels like it's alive, you know?
Oh,
it's like
seriously. Oh my God. Holy shit, was Todd McFarlane studying Rick Leonardi? Because Leonardi was doing stuff with capes before McFarlane. And I think that, Todd obviously became famous for the way he drew Batman's cape as well as Spawn's cape in the future. But I got to say, Rick Leonardi got there first. And man, I could not agree more, Chris. His actual cloak is like a whole nother character in this series, and it's just amazingly drawn, and also the visual signature that he brings to Dagger, and the way that Dagger was a ballet dancer, and the way that she moves across these pages is just like fucking incredible. Like, she is such a graceful character, and I saw a lot of the the Luca Effect, which we talked about in Blue Devil, right? Leonardi using that to great effect with Dagger as well as Spider-Man when he guest stars. But man, I swear, Leonardi has like a visual signature, he and Austin, that they bring to Cloak and Dagger that is astonishing in how sophisticated and graceful these characters are. And I mean, for me, it's another one of these situations where I feel like the art in a lot of ways outpaces the writing. And
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah. We've seen that before in some of these 80s comics. And I just got to say, I mean, like, I think that, Bill Mantlo, it does some interesting stuff, but overall, the art is the star of the show. The art is jaw-dropping in its sophistication. And obviously, we're talking about the influence on Todd McFarlane, but, we just confirmed before we started recording here, the first Cloak and Dagger miniseries came out in 82. And then this Cloak and Dagger ongoing series we're talking about, it came out in 85?
Yeah, 85,
right?
yeah, 85.
Yeah, so both of these I believe, predated the appearance of Arthur Adams on Longshot. And so we have to believe that with that first Leonardi and Austin joint drop in '82, and then Leonardi and Arthur Adams sharing Terry Austin as an inker, I think that it's very clear that Arthur Adams was also looking at Rick Leonardi, because there's a lot of similarity between that art style, both their art styles, and nobody else drew like this prior to
No.
Leonardi and Austin. And I'm not trying to just say Arthur Adams was copying Leonardi. Obviously, they shared an inker, and that was a big part of it. So I think there was a lot of crossover for a lot of reasons. And as also we were just talking about, Terry Austin was really innovative because he was inking with a crow quill nib at a time where very, very few inkers at Marvel Comics or DC were inking with anything other than a brush primarily. And so Terry Austin was inking with a crow quill nib dip pen, which allowed for a tremendous amount of detail. And he was using a rapidograph for the technical lines and the backgrounds. But that gave the book such a level of detail that, we'd never really seen before in most comics. And we hadn't even seen it with Leonardi's art prior to working with Austin. Yeah. So, I mean, that team, when they came together, I just feel like it was lightning in a bottle. And, it's, Terry Austin also obviously deserves credit, but Jesus Christ, what a fantastic looking book visually.
Well, the thing about Terry Austin is that everyone talks about his work, how like it sort of like focuses everybody's art in a way where it's very clear. This is the thing, because all the work he did with John Byrne on X-Men, like that work looks different. There's that level of detail. There's that level that is that's not there in his other work, when Byrne begins to ink himself. I think what's interesting though too is, here's the thing about this book that I noticed is that, in modern comics, there's a type of detail that was spurred in by, again, like a Todd McFarlane and like a Rob Liefeld and people who figured out how to do image, but it's like there's too much detail in their work. And I feel like that what they do here in this book is the right amount of detail to show you the right amount of stuff, because they do other things in this book with the color and other things to kind of like save you on detail and things like that, because it's the way they do the backgrounds, which we'll get into when we start going through the book. But I was like, God damn, like this is like what you wanted. I'll say this. I haven't read a Marvel comic really from this era in like 30, 40 years. But seeing this makes me say, oh yeah, this is what Marvel comics like in my mind like looked like. But in actuality, it's really like, no, it was these few books that I remembered so much because they were so they were so bright. Not to use that bad metaphor talking about Cloak and Dagger, but they burned so bright.
Yes.
In my mind for what this was. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is so good. And
yes.
Look, before we get into this, well, let's just get into it. Let's just get into it because I have something that I wanted to say.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, unlike we looked the stories about these two teens. We said they've injected with heroin. I think this book suffers from one thing. I think it suffers from one big thing, and maybe this is why the book didn't have like a longer run or whatever it is. This book needed to have been an epic comic.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're right, because it was in the Marvel Universe proper, but it's dealing with fucking child sex trafficking and drugs and like, you're right, man.
With runaways and like the really. So let's just jump right in. So the first issue begins and we're in Times Square. And Times Square, for people who probably don't remember, used to be this wretched hive of scum and villainy. It was like this place of like pornos and peep shops and just like that. It reminded me. I mean, the only thing that show called The Deuce that was on HBO, but it's like, but this is why I was saying earlier that it's like, oh, this is why this should be an epic comic. Because it's too adult even now for you to really like deal with this in just a mainstream comic. But the funny thing is, this guy, when he's walking in here, it says somewhere, he walks into this place, this little adults only peep shop place. It's said somewhere that like they were always talking about the mayor was gonna clean up Times Square. He was always threatening,
Right.
yeah, he's gonna do that. And yeah, here it is. It says city officials keep threatening, keep it says city officials keep threatening to renovate it and by gentrification the to force to force the sleaze shops out. That's funny because that's actually what happened. You know, like
Yeah, yeah, it
about
actually did literally happen. So Times Square was no longer a den of iniquity, as you described. And I gotta say that Leonardi and Austin, with the way that they draw Times Square, it really does look, it looks grimy and it looks kind of disturbing and it's so cluttered. And, the peep show at this adult bookstore that this guy is going into, like it does feel like a nasty, grimy little shop, and they do a great job of communicating it, frankly, to your point earlier, in a way that is a little bit shocking still to see in a mainline Marvel comic book where Spider-Man's about to, make a guest appearance in a couple issues. These first few pages of the first issue were honestly pretty jarring. I mean, I can't recall a major superhero comic book that has been launched with a first issue of like a guy walking into this type of adults only porno shop slash peep show, and then on the splash page we see Cloak and Dagger. When the guy puts in his quarters to see the peep show, Cloak and Dagger suddenly appear in the booth next to the poor girl who's like crying because she's clearly being forced to do this. And I gotta say, man, this was a really jarring splash page and a jarring kind of welcome to the Cloak and Dagger universe. I was kind of taken aback by why, wow, we're really doing this. This is fucking crazy for a Marvel superhero comic. But all right, like this is wild.
no, exactly. I mean, it reminds me of the scene in that movie called Paris, Texas, when he goes in to see his wife at the peep show. But see, this is the thing. It's like it's shocking, it's jarring, but it's like it's not enough, right? Because it's not like if this was if this was an epic comic,
Yeah.
this would be a lot more. But see, here's the
Yeah.
thing about it, right? It's like this was crazy. These are teenagers who have
Yeah. Yeah.
been there's teenage
Yes.
heroes, but they're teenage women who are into peep show. So it's not just porno. It's like they're doing kiddie
Yeah.
in this comic.
This is crazy. Well, just the fact that Cloak and Dagger are teenagers, I think Tyrone, aka Cloak, is 17, and Tandy, aka Dagger, is 16, which is shocking all by itself when you consider the fact that Dagger has one of the more revealing outfits of any superheroine in the Marvel Universe, with that dagger cutout down the front of the costume. It's actually quite risque, even for an adult
Yeah,
woman heroine,
yeah.
much less a 16-year-old. So that on the face of it already is shocking. And then, like you say, the fact that they're then rescuing other kids who are being sexually trafficked and whatnot as well. This is a very edgy and crazy storyline to have these kids at the center of. And I think one of the only things that sort of mitigates it is I think that Leonardi and Austin are not drawing these characters to look like 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds.
No.
Like I don't think that Dagger looks 16. I don't think that Cloak looks 17. They look significantly more adult than that. And honestly, thank God they do, because I think this would be very disturbing if Leonardi and Austin actually drew them to look age appropriate. But it's all just really, really bizarre, just the way all this came together. I understand it's part of their backstory. They're runaways, they're teenagers. That's part of the story. But yeah, they definitely. Thank goodness they don't look that young in the series, and it's an interesting series of choices that led us to this. But man, what a weird setup for a series altogether. But
Well,
yeah,
but think about it though. But Spider-Man is a teen. He's a teen when he gets that. He's in high school when he gets bit first.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
but he's not dealing with this type of
No, he's
complete
not.
vice. Like this is the Vice Squad of the Marvel
Yeah,
universe and
well, that's
shit.
the
You know,
weirdest thing. That's the weirdest thing, is to put children
I
in
know in the
charge.
Vice
Like,
Squad.
this is such a weird idea to put children in charge of handling this kind of crime in the Marvel universe. Like Bill Mantlo. I mean, I get that this was a wild kind of like inspiration that came to him, and we can talk about that later because we were reading about how he was inspired for this. And I appreciate the originality of it, but man, I'm really shocked that there wasn't more pushback from Jim Shooter And, I'm surprised that, like, maybe cooler heads didn't prevail in terms of, putting this out there. But honestly, I guess it also shows you how in the 80s, the shit that was able to fly in the 80s, everywhere, and here in comics is just stuff that would never fly today. And
No.
we're gonna get to issue 3 where Spider-Man fucking makes out with the 16-year-old Dagger, which, like, I almost fell out of my chair when I read that.
But he's not that old. He's probably like maybe 19 at the time. So
he's working. He's already working as a photographer, though. Like, he's on a story working, doing. Like,
yes, that's true. Look. I'm not trying to say it's fine, but I'm just trying to say from my memory.
Yeah,
he's still like a kid. Okay, look.
I think he's older than that. I think you're giving him too much of a pass. I think he's in his 20s at this point.
I think, you know what? I think he's really working. I think he's going to school at that place called Empire State. So he's between 18 and 21, 22. But it was a little shocking to me, and also because he took his mask off with no,
that made no sense.
Just boom. But
that made no sense at all. We'll get to that, but that was fucking wild. That was crazy.
Here's the thing I will say. This is what I will say. I feel that their powers mature them in a way, and I say that because in the issue 4, we'll get to it in a little bit. When Beyonder takes their powers away, and you see Tyrone, he's back to the stuttering kid. His face looks younger. He looked younger in that.
You're right. That's a good point. Yes, he does actually. And I think Tandy might look a bit younger too at that point too. But I remember definitely thinking that about Tyrone, is that he suddenly looked like a kid.
Yeah. So it's that. But the thing that I want to point out, which I think is so fucking cool in this comic, and they do it so much in this comic, is, so if you look at the on page 2. The last panel, second to last panel, right? He does it in most of the panels on this, right? But he does this thing, particularly in the last panel, right, where he does this thing where the characters that are important, so the bouncer, the guy who's the cashier check, and the man, they're fully colored, but everything else is kind of colored in like a wash with it's like these big primary colors that kind of push things in the background. So
you're right. Yeah, you're right. And the splash page does the same thing. Now that you mention it,
yeah. But it's really interesting that he does that. Well, not it's him. It's Glynis. Glynis Oliver. Yeah, Glynis Oliver. She does this cool thing with the color to do this in a way where it's hyper focusing your attention. And I don't know if I've seen someone in a modern comic color things that way, because
no, definitely not. Not this way.
Not this way. It's a very cool way of causing these different planes of action to be visible. Because we'll get to some more of this. But it's like, so as we go through this first issue, it's like you start seeing what's happening. This 4th page or 5th page, people are trying to shoot. Pull their guns out
with all the panels. Oh my God! I was counting the panels on that page. I think there's 12. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, there's freaking 12 panels on that page, Chris, and it does not look overstuffed. It looks amazing. It's like fantastic storytelling.
It's fantastic storytelling. And what's also crazy is there's a lot of dialogue on this page too, man.
Yeah.
So
there is, man. It's incredible storytelling, man. Yeah. Like, honestly, this is a masterclass in storytelling from Leonardi and Austin. Like, this is just really sophisticated storytelling. Even when the dialogue is at times, not the most sophisticated dialogue, to put it lightly. Even when the dialogue is just kind of like, super expository, like we're hearing their origin again for the 19th time. Like, Leonardi and Austin bring a sophistication to the visuals that really transcends the story and what they're actually uttering, what the characters are uttering, because visually it's just such incredible acting. Like the way that they use their bodies, like in terms of their emotions, when Dagger and Cloak are feeling anything, you see it the way their bodies are posed, and it's like, it's really just high level comics art and comic storytelling. It's really pretty amazing. And you got that Luca Effect also coming up that very next page. After that 12 panel page, the very next page is another super dense page where Dagger's literally dancing across the giant panel in the middle. And man, it's just like
Oh, and
this
see, what's
first
crazy
issue, man,
what's crazy is,
unbelievable.
okay, again, that's the Luca Effect, but what he
Yeah.
did here, I've never seen anybody do this with the Luca Effect, where each image is a different color.
Well, that's Glynis though. That's Glynis again. Glynis Oliver. What a decision,
That is
right?
so amazing because
Yeah.
usually when they do this, it's like, like if it's Spider-Man or Daredevil, it's kind of like it's their colors fade the farther like away they go from the image, and
Right.
by the time they hit the hero shots, it's the full color. But this was such a smart choice, and this kind of shocked me at how
Yeah.
dope this is in terms
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
its storytelling, and also like a way to kind of like get you to in terms of like, oh, like your eyes never lost. And what's really cool about this panel when she's doing the ballet thing around the page is that like she's all these different colors of light, and the people in the background is green, and the people are shooting are kind of like they're being lit up by their guns. But Cloak is like depicted as his with the way he's supposed to be drawn. He's got the
Yeah.
like there's no like his coloring is proper, and it was just a standard coloring. This is so I can't believe no one's talked about this book before.
No, it's true. That's why I'm so glad we're talking about it. And I'm glad we started with the second Cloak and Dagger series because, we discussed this beforehand. The first Cloak and Dagger series, that was the 4-issue miniseries that came out a couple of years earlier, still looks pretty dope. It still looks pretty fucking cool. It still looked a lot better than most Marvel comics at the time. But, we discussed how we wanted to start with this particular series because they leveled up even further.
Yeah.
And I felt like, we see it now looking at this. This is why I think it's so cool we're looking at this because, if they were firing on like, an 8 out of 10 or a, 8.5 out of 10 in that first miniseries, I feel like they're right here at like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. Like
This is
I
10
can't
out of 10.
imagine.
This
Yeah,
is
I
10
mean, you
out
know
of
what?
10.
Yeah, you're right. This could not be much better. It really is just fucking jaw-dropping art. And especially you got to put it in context. For the time, comics at Marvel did not look like this. No one was drawing like this. And I think Leonardi is really one of the forgotten influences on so many of the image artists because you can see Liefeld in here. You can see Silvestri. Oh my God, you can see so much
You
Silvestri
see
in here.
Silvestri,
Yeah.
and we talked about that. You can see McFarlane. It's
Yeah, you
like
can see
it's
McFarlane. I mean,
all up in there.
honestly, yeah, you can see, and Michael Golden also existed before Leonardi, and so Golden and Leonardi, I think, were more contemporaries. But I can definitely see some Michael Golden kind of, crossover here as well. I mean, Leonardi, I think, has not been discussed nearly enough, considering how just insanely good his work was, and there's just so much to look at here. We probably should mention when we keep talking about the Luca effect over and over. We discussed it at length in our Daredevil episode, but it's really just that effect in a comic book when you see a character who's like in fast motion and the artist draws multiple iterations of that character in the same panel, kind of moving through that motion. And so that's what the DeLuca effect is. This is, something we had a big old chat about, in that previous episode. But yeah, just in case anyone's confused what that is. But I really think we should give a shout out to the entire creative team because I think you're right. Visually, this is such a feast for the eyes. They're firing on 10 out of 10. And we've talked about Glynis Oliver and how advanced the coloring is here as well, which it certainly is. But I have to also say Ken Bruzenak as the letterer is just also putting on a clinic.
He
Like
is.
this is so good. So
It's
fucking good. This
amazing.
lettering is just amazing. Every page, it looks like there's so much detail to the lettering and so many smart decisions. And Bruzenak, of course, would go on to letter American Flag and most of Howard Chaykin's work. And you can see why Chaykin wanted to exclusively work with Bruzenak because this is just some of the best lettering, some of the best hand lettering you'll see in comics.
Oh, for
Ever.
sure. Like whether it's the thought balloons, the dialogue, or the damn the sound effects.
Yes.
He's doing a master class.
Really?
And what's really interesting is like you'll see it if you're listening, you go watch this on YouTube, you'll see it in a video later on when we get issue 3. There's one panel, I think, when they're talking about Spider-Man, where he does something kind of interesting, which I've never seen anybody really do before, where he puts the balloon behind the body. It's behind the feet.
I didn't notice that.
Like, if you didn't notice it when we get to it, I'll point it out because I was like, oh, I've never seen that. That's really fucking cool. And
yeah.
It's sort of those things where it's like he's trying to let the art like sing a little more, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't really know, but it's a really smart choice that they're doing. In this book, I have to tell you, I mean, as much as Frank Miller and John Byrne, like we're getting, and Perez, we're getting like this the scream from everybody at this time.
Yeah.
This book is, in terms of the arts,
Yes.
is outrageous. And I
Yeah.
just feel like where this book stumbles and where it's not Daredevil and where it's not um I even New Teen Titans, some of that Wolfman was doing, is that that Bill Mantlo, he doesn't reach for what this book could be from what he lays down. Like this, I
Yeah.
hate to say this, but it's sort of like it's a failure of the promise of the premise, you
Yeah,
know? And
yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think that's fair because on that story level, you could do so much with these characters. And I think the brilliance really is in the premise, like in terms of the story. The premise and the setup is pretty phenomenal. And you're right, these four issues at least don't really do much other than kind of play the same song, different iterations of that same song with these characters kind of saying a lot of the same stuff over and over again for four
well, well,
issues.
well, 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 that's because I think it's like, again, this needs to be a mature label book, right?
Yeah.
And here's why I say this. In this opening issue, the first thing they do is they go into this peep show, they rescue all these girls, and they kill all, and they don't kill, but they incapacitate these pornographers. If this book, like some of the stuff that Miller did, there's like an issue of, this is kind of crazy. Is an issue of Daredevil where like these kids are taking drugs. I think Punisher's in it. I think it's like issue like 182 or something like that. And it's
Mhm.
like, is the cover is like is Punisher shooting Daredevil? It's like, I mean, people know that cover.
Yeah.
And it's like, but there's like the kids get drugs and like they get heroin in that, or it's like some laced up heroin, and their mouths are all like smoking stuff like this, but it's like they're dealing with child here. And the one
Yeah.
thing that he doesn't do, that he can't do, that is that he's not getting in, like they're not talking to the girl who
Yeah.
got kidnapped. She's just like a prop, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, if this was like an image book, not an image book, an epic book, they, talk with her before the police got there, or they would
Yeah.
take her with them, like, hey, like we're gonna go to the it, but so if so it that's what I feel like. There's no real slight to Mantlo's writing in terms of that. It's just like, oh, I bet you that you wanted to take this in a place that you just couldn't do in a Marvel comic. Like they would have just
Yeah.
shut you down, you know.
I think you're totally right. I think that was probably a big thing that was going on here. And it is such unusual subject matter, like we say, for a mainline Marvel comic. And also, I think that Mantlo's storytelling, to an extent, is a victim of the time period because he's obviously writing in this very florid kind of style that is overly expositional in the way that most comics, frankly, were in the 80s, where you have the Jim Shooter dictum that we've frequently talked about on this show of how Shooter really believed that every comic was someone's first, and so every issue you had to recap the main character's origins. And in Cloak and Dagger, I feel like they recap their origins multiple times per issue. And I feel like I know it all by heart now, and it's like that was a very conventional device at the time, but that type of writing and that type of overwriting was one of those things that was so common back then. And it's not just Mantlo. Obviously, it was Chris Claremont, it was Doug Mensch, it was Don McGregor. It was so many of these writers back then that wrote in this style that when you look back at the comics of that era, I think that's one of the toughest hurdles to get over because we're so not used to reading in that way. But I will say that one thing I find with this style is that it's so verbally dense that it does in a way cast a little bit more of a spell because you're finding yourself immersed in the story because you have no choice but to kind of submit to all of this verbiage if you're actually going to really engage with the story and focus on it. And so in a way, like, I'm not mad at it. Like, I still enjoy a lot of the storytelling. I have my issues with the story, but in terms of the style, I'm not necessarily mad at it, but it is an artifact of the time that I can understand a lot of people today bumping on and having trouble with, as opposed to the art, which frankly the art, like you're saying and I'm saying, the art is so fucking transcendent, it's so inspired that it doesn't matter what decade you look at this artwork, whether it's 82 or 2022 or 2052. I think people are going to love this artwork from Leonardi and Austin and this storytelling. But I think the story from Mantlo, maybe not so much. I think you have to look at that in the context of the time. You can study it, you can appreciate it, but I don't know that people will enjoy the story the same way they're going to enjoy the artwork for years to come.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I mean, and it's like to me, it's like so if this is being done in the last 10 years, this would be like this story would be more decompressed, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
but because it's more decompressed, we'd probably, like I said before, these runaway girls, we would get some of their story. I don't think the police would get there in time. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like that's where I'm like, oh, this is not a modern story, because you wouldn't want to get into that level of I ran away, I got I mean, like, look, they even say in here, you know, you've tricked people. You've done, some people here because of violence. Some people here because you get them on drugs. Like they say these things that are like pretty disgusting. Like
Yeah.
in terms of the human trafficking, the type of behavior. I was type of shit
Yeah.
this in that movie. Isn't that movie Taken? Which is rated
Hmm.
R, and they're like, again, they're doing it like these little kids doing it. I'll just point something out to you. It's really cool. What page is this? Page 7. There's
Hmm.
this middle panel where Dagger's got her hands up, and she's getting ready to blind all them. Like the way that his cape is in this, it has this watery feel right here.
Yeah,
It's
you're
kind of like
right. Yes.
it's like it's flowing around in a
Yeah,
way, and
totally.
it's like it's so awesome. And
It's a
then
character. It's really a character. It's amazing. I've never seen a cape or a cloak drawn like this prior to Leonardi. And after Leonardi, McFarlane and many others suddenly, I think, really went nuts with capes.
yeah, see, I think this is why I'm just gonna go on a limb here. I think the reason why that Leonardi is not as celebrated as possible is that he's not on books that are fucking like that. He's not on the hot book,
Well,
and
but we have to say though, he was a fill-in artist on Uncanny X-Men, and he did like a bunch of issues here and there for filling in for Silvestri. But so I think Chris Claremont loved Leonardi, and so I think he personally had him come do. I don't know how many issues he did, but I think he did quite a few, like 6 to maybe even 12 issues on and off. But I would say, to your point, he was never the regular artist
that's what I'm
on that
saying.
book. Yeah, yeah, he was the fill-in artist. He wasn't Mark Silvestri. He was the fill-in, the pinch hitter. But man, I mean, Chris Claremont was very smart to get Leonardi to come fill in for Silvestri, because I think with Dan Green inking both of them, like, the work's not a million miles away from each other. But I wish we lived in an alternate timeline where Rick Leonardi had gone with Image, with the original 7 guys,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Leonardi, because if Leonardi had his own book and he'd actually gone and launched something, and I think he was a little older
He's older.
than those guys,
I mean,
and
because
didn't
if
work out that way.
yeah, because if that first miniseries was 82, and
Yeah.
Image wasn't formed until 91, and Liefeld was what, 21, 22
Yeah,
when he
but
did that.
Liefeld was the baby. Liefeld was the baby, but Valentino was twice as old as Liefeld. I think Valentino was like 40. So Leonardi could have been like the second oldest. He could have been, I think, younger than Valentino still. But I think Image was mostly young guys, and then Valentino was like 10 years older,
Yeah,
maybe,
but
or 15 years older than
and
most of
again,
them.
those guys are all doing hot books. Like,
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
see, it's I mean, it's here's the thing though, and the hot book is who's writing it, because the thing that really made Tom McFarlane was the Peter David Hulk that he did, and then the Dave McCleany
Yeah.
Spider-Man,
Spidey.
which gave him
Hmm.
the black suit, and it was like, oh, that's gonna give you like a different like burst, than the Leonardi. I think did Leonardi do a Batman? I feel like he did a Batman, or maybe he did it in that Batman annual or
I
the
mean,
Batman.
he jumped around. He jumped
He
around
jumped
so
around.
much.
Okay, he jumped
Yeah, a
around
lot.
because see, here's something right
We'll
here.
talk about that later. But yeah, he jumped around a lot.
Because here's something at the bottom of page 7, and we should go fast because we got something to do. But the bottom of page 7, this overhead shot of the other criminals coming in, like
Yeah.
that's fucking masterclass. You see all that dirt and grime on the floor, like that is fucking amazing.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. I mean, like honestly, like yeah, that is masterclass. That shot. I mean, yeah, I can't wait for people to be looking at the images in our video because we're going to be, focusing in on so many of these panels we're talking about in the video. And you're right, Chris. That's an amazing panel. Just like frame by frame, panel by panel, this really is just like, unreal how good this is.
If you look at this thing at the bottom of page 7, this feels like Frank Miller looked at this to create Sin City.
Oh, yeah, totally. Oh, and look at the top of the next page. I mean, the top of the next page also.
Yeah.
Like, you look at top of page 8, like 7 and 8 look like they could be, bottom of 7, top of 8 look like they could be Sin City panels.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's crazy.
This is
predating
predating nuts. This is predating Sin City by like 5-7 years.
Oh yeah, I think that Rick Leonardi was an artist's artist, and I think all of the artists were studying Leonardi because what he was doing was very next level, and just it's so sophisticated. I keep using that word, but I don't know what else to say. But the way that he's able to capture a figure in motion and actually portray like the emotion of these people, and like with the very subtle gestural work that he and Austin are doing. I mean, I cannot think of many or even any comic artists at Marvel or DC at this time that were better with kind of like that physical acting, the way that Leonardi is kind of having these characters express themselves. And it's really dynamic and just so exciting, but he's combining that with just incredible panel-to-panel storytelling. Like they're doing a lot of creative stuff and with the storytelling and the panel breakdowns and the incredible character design of the way that their costumes just look so fucking sick. I mean, this is just, I am like blown away as we look at every page. We could go on about this forever. I think hopefully people are going to see what we're saying. And yeah, we can talk about the story more, but basically in the rest of the first issue, not a lot happens, to be honest. It's just like they break up the criminal sort of like sex trafficking ring that's operating out of this adult bookstore / peep show in Times Square, and then the cops show up. We have a subplot with a police officer who we meet named Detective O'Reilly, who's a woman who's apparently like the one honest cop on the NYPD, and she can't believe that all of her fellow cops are on the take from all these various criminals. So we got a little police subplot there. And then really the rest of the first issue is like we go back to the church, the Holy Ghost Church, where Cloak and Dagger apparently, it says here in the text box, for several months, Cloak and Dagger have used this church on 42nd Street as a sanctuary between raids on the underworld. And inside, Father Francis Xavier Delgado confers communion upon his congregation. And then this is kind of interesting. Cloak and Dagger show up. They start talking to this priest, Father Delgado, and they get into a big argument with them. And Father Delgado, like, he just hates Cloak. He hates Cloak. He thinks Cloak's a demon corrupting Dagger, and he's trying to get Dagger away from him. And like this whole dialogue went like really crazy for me. Like I just thought this was a wild relationship going on here. And what happens the next couple issues is very odd. Like it's all a very strange way to launch a series to me. Like a lot of the storytelling is just so bizarre. So this priest is like yelling at them and he's pissed off. And Cloak says, "You would condemn my darkness, Father, and yet still offer us sanctuary." And then the priest says, "I curse your demonic darkness, Cloak. I invited you two to stay so I could pray for the day I might free Dagger from whatever hold you have over her." And I'm like, wow, this priest is so hostile toward Cloak. Like they're both ostensibly kids who have been like, cursed by this crazy thing that's happened to them, and they're runaways. And this guy's supposedly a man of God, but I mean, honestly, he seems like kind of a racist man of God. Like the way it's coming across here. Like, I gotta say, it does feel rather racist the way that he's literally calling Cloak, the young black runaway, a demon who's abducted and is corrupting Dagger, when in fact they're both kind of in the same boat to a large extent. And I did appreciate at least Dagger pushed back, and Dagger says, "What? Cloak's got no mysterious power over me." And then, cue the origin retelling. Dagger goes on to say, "We were both runaways, scared, lonely, and lost on New York streets when a roving pack of body snatchers found us and spirited us away to Ellis Island. There we were experimented on by gangsters who were trying to create a new chemical addiction. Of all the kids injected, only Tyrone Johnson and Tandy Bowen survived the drug that changed us into Cloak and Dagger." I love that she's talking about them in the third person. She's talking about herself and Tyrone in the third person. "Of all the kids, only Tyrone and Tandy survived. The drug changed us into Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and I have a mission, Father, to see that what happened to us never happens to other kids." And, the priest is not buying it. And he says, "That's Cloak talking again, Dagger, telling you to destroy all those whom you two, in the wisdom of your adolescence, have decided are evil. If there are sinners out there, punishment will be visited upon them for their sins." And this argument just goes on for the next few pages. And it gets even more intense, and ultimately Cloak gets pissed off and spirits the priest into his realm of darkness inside his cloak, where people are forced to confront their worst fears. And he really fucks up the priest.
He fucks the priest up big time.
Yeah, he fucks the priest up big time. And then Cloak is so upset, he wanders out into the congregation where all the people were just kind of asking for, forgiveness and repentance from the priest here. And, and Cloak basically just, he fucks with all the people here now too. And it's a really weird sort of ending to this first issue where Cloak just starts torturing all the people in the church. And then Dagger has to try to help save the people. It's a really, really weird use of a first issue. And then at the end of it, Dagger's like, "I'm out of here. I can't work with you anymore, Cloak. Maybe the Father's right. I can't do this anymore. Our mission is making us monsters. I'm getting out." And so it's really just weird that the end of this first issue is like, "Oh no, the end of Cloak and Dagger," and Dagger's quitting. So I thought it was just an odd use of a first issue. But anyways, I'm curious what you made of all this. It's just very, very strange to me.
So it's strange to me because there's two things that are happening. Is that one, I'm going to harp on this again. It's sort of like they don't. Well, I didn't harp on this part, but it's like the thing I don't like about the story. The thing I don't like about the characterization in this is why I'm glad you say it feels a little racist the way that the priest is attacking Cloak. I also feel like it's a little bit of implicit bias or this inability to really kind of write the Cloak character, because the way that Dagger's written, she's written like someone who's got a life, and that she has this and she's got a lot more like potential agency, and she can verbalize what's happening, and and Cloak is sort of written like a cipher in a way where it's like, I mean, there's a sense of a feeling of there's pain with Dagger, that she's lost. She was this runaway from this upper crust suburb which is where I grew up actually, so I know what that is when they mention that. But it's like
in Shaker Heights,
Ohio. Yeah. But what's crazy is that you don't get any kind of sense in these 4 issues at all. Like I get no sense of Cloak's personality prior to them turning into Cloak and Dagger. And there's a moment that you feel that Dagger is very aware of her life and what she lost, and they spend all this time in the next the rest of the series, at least next 4 issues, where her stepfather is trying to find her, and the priest has reached out to her mom and stepfather, everything like that. And it's kind of like he won't even do this is where the racism part comes in. It's like he won't even lift a finger to try to figure out if there's anything about Cloak.
You're totally right, man. No, you're 100% right. And it is like this exact thing that you're saying. It's like Dagger's life has inherent value.
Yes.
And so the priest is so concerned about Dagger's life, and and the stepfather is so concerned about Dagger. Everyone's really worried about Dagger. And everyone's acting like Cloak isn't also a 17-year-old kid who is like a runaway who's gone through this horrible trauma himself. it's really bizarre. And you're totally right. We don't get that sense of full humanity for the Cloak character. And really, the place I see it the most, honestly, is I feel like Leonardi and Austin, they give the characters more emotion and more humanity than Mantlo does.
Yes.
Honestly, like that, I feel like the art gives the characters back the dignity, and particularly Cloak, that the story kind of robs them of, because the story is not really allowing Cloak's character to have that same equal weight. But I think the art really does confer a lot of the humanity on them. And again, it's why, thank God, this art is so inspired, because I think it's really transcending the flaws of the storytelling by the writing specifically.
You're absolutely right, because you know what, I never watched the TV show for Cloak and Dagger.
Oh yeah, me neither. It was on Freeform, I believe.
Freeformer. But the thing about what this story could, and it's so strange. I mean, again, this is why I'm like, oh, you would have had more freedom to do this if you did it as an epic thing. But it's kind of like you have these two people who are from totally different backgrounds. He's from the slums of Boston, which is a very racist city. She's from this upper crust like suburb in the east side of Cleveland. And it's kind of like, how do they talk about what it means to be on the street? To be like, that they got drugged out. They got, because like the thing, that movie. It's like, I watched this movie called Nickel Boys, and it's a very interesting movie because what's her name? Angelina Ellis is in it, and she doesn't have a lot of screen time, but she gets this dynamic role because she's so concerned about her child. It's about this black boy who's 16, 17, who goes to this reform school, and she's like, where it's not even her child. It's like, I think she's the aunt or something like that. But it's like, the thing is that you make a good point about the value. It's just the whole thing about like the Black Lives Matter thing is like, oh, let these black boys like know that their lives matter. Like, he's a kid, he's still a kid, and you know what? And the thing is that black mothers are so concerned about their boys because they know the streets will take them out. If it's not the other black gangs, it's going to be the police, or it's going to be drugs. It's these things that white kids don't necessarily have to deal with, particularly a white girl from the suburbs, so it's like, that's where this story completely fails, and I feel like unless you gave like a Christopher Priest, like a chance to write this, or like a Reggie Hullen maybe in the future, if someone did do it, like, you're not going to get that perspective. And I don't think you would do that now, because they've been around for like 40 years. So you wouldn't like be telling them a story about if they're 16 or 17, and what that, like, that class differential, that economic differential, and that racial differential is, how that's different. And if they're thrown together in this world of like, we have to mete out punishment to the people who commit crimes against youth,
Yeah,
because I think
it's
the perspective would be
yeah.
different.
No, yeah, I think you're right. And it is such a fascinating concept, and it's just not explored fully the way that it could be if you really gave it the proper attention and like the proper, just depth to both of the characters. I will say, though, that Mantlo, his inspiration for this was interesting. And, I think that Mantlo did have a really very genuine concern for the people who were dealing with like the drug trade and crime in the streets. And this is borne out by the fact that, I don't know if you know, but Bill Mantlo, shortly after he like finished his writing career, mostly for Marvel and then a little bit for DC, he passed the bar exam. And in 1987, Bill Mantlo, the writer of Cloak and Dagger, began working as a legal aid society public defender in the Bronx. And so he legitimately in real life started like defending people who needed a public defender in the Bronx. So I think that these characters, Cloak and Dagger, were obviously very close to Mantlo's heart. And I think that, I believe it's one of the things he's proudest of in his career. And Bill Mantlo, is still alive, but he suffered a very tragic accident when he was rollerblading, I think it was in '92. And so after that accident, he was hit by a car. It was a hit and run it was a hit and run situation, and Bill was comatose for some time. And it's severely affected his ability to care for himself. So that's a very tragic story in terms of like where Mantlo is and what's happened with him. But prior to that happening, he legitimately was a public defender, and so I think we can't question that this storyline and the stuff at the core of it was close to his heart. I think it very much was. And just to kind of put a bow on that, I did also want to just read briefly where the inspiration came from. And this is just a quote from Mantlo talking about the inspiration for Cloak and Dagger and where this idea first came to him. And so he says the inspiration happened after he visited Ellis Island in New York. He recounted that, quote, the characters came in the night when all was silent and my mind was blank. They came completely conceived as to their powers and attributes, their origin and motivation. They embodied between them all that fear and misery, hunger and longing that haunted me on Ellis Island. And so it sounds like Mantlo clearly had a very emotional and almost spiritual experience with the creation of these characters. And I don't question that he really obviously was doing what he could to tell a story that was speaking to these issues that were really important. But like you say, Chris, I think there's a limitation to the capacity of all writers and all people and all artists. And even if you're trying to do something where you're giving more empathy and more consideration to certain characters, it doesn't mean you're always able to. I should point out, and we should mention, that Ed Hannigan was the artist who co-created Cloak and Dagger with Bill Mantlo. And Hannigan here says a couple words I can share. He says that Bill had a short 1 or 2 page synopsis of the story for Cloak and Dagger that he showed me. We discussed what the characters would look like. He gave me a lot of leeway, but it was fairly obvious that Cloak would be black and have a big animated black cloak, and that Dagger would be white with a skin-tight leotard type of thing. I'm not sure, but I think I might have come up with her ballet dancer angle. I put the same kind of amulet/clasp on both costumes, and I came up with the dagger-shaped cutout on her costume, which was quite daring at the time. So there you go. Just to give full respect to Ed Hannigan, he was one of the most acclaimed cover artists at the time in mainstream comics. I think he was known as something of a genius when it came to cover design. I think he designed or drew a lot of the most iconic covers in that era. And this co-creation of Cloak and Dagger, I think, is also one of the more significant things he did as well. But yeah, I think just worth reflecting on the creation of Cloak and Dagger, where Bill Mantlo's head was at, and but it doesn't mean you're going to be successful with every aspect of any story you tell, no matter how impassioned you are. And I think that in this case, the premise and the setup is extraordinary, and thank God Leonardi and Austin were there to sort of lift this story up in the stratosphere. Because if this was drawn by average house style Marvel artists, I think it would be a curiosity because of the subject matter, but I don't think we'd be sitting here doing a 2-hour episode on it.
That I don't think that it would have got. I think that it would have died after the miniseries, and that then they might have shown up. And they obviously got a lot of fan mail from the Spider-Man issue was in. They were like, "Who are these people? Who are these people?" But you're right. If it didn't have the right art team, and everybody with Austin, with Oliver, with Leonardi, I don't think that these characters stand the test of time. Because I mean, it's just I mean, like, there's a lot more that could have happened in this first issue. See, like the thing that I don't, it's like you're right. His heart and mind are obviously in the right place, but it's like he's not reaching for a level of of understanding the other in a way that he's able to put into the book. And I'll give you a great example of where another point that's like you did something cool, but you didn't like. Again, maybe it's because of the storytelling. You trying to do too much in the first issue. But it almost feels like this could be 3 issues of story if it was done today. But here's why. So on page 21, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a moment where Cloak has sucked all these people, the parishioners, into his cloak, and Dagger is freeing them. And if you look at the 4th panel down, it's like, and now when you're in the void of Cloak, you see the darkness that you've committed or the darkness that might be your future, right? From the
Right,
sins you've
right.
committed, right? Now here's a really interesting little piece of panel. Fourth panel down, you have this guy who's running toward Dagger because she's like, come to me, I'll guide you out. But you have these Nazi SS men chasing after him.
Yeah, oh my god, I didn't notice that.
So
Wow,
so
that
to
is a crazy detail. Holy shit.
me, I'm asking
Wow.
myself, is this guy a Nazi? Is this guy Jewish? I mean, this guy who's trying to escape, he's obviously an older person. 'Cause all these people here
Yeah,
are like they're old. That's why they're kind of like this. I don't know
wow.
these dregs of society type of people at the mass like this, and I'm like, okay, so now you got a guy who just has a Holocaust memory, a World War II memory,
Yeah,
chasing him, and it's not
yeah.
explored.
No, not at all. But man, talk about again just like a visual detail. And who knows, like, I mean, to give credit to Mantlo, maybe that was described in the script for the panel. But man, what an incredible thing to just drop in as a visual. Like I
Exactly.
literally, yeah, I completely missed that. But now that you're saying that, that's astonishing. That is like some real depth to like the horror and the darkness that this one character is immediately picturing when he's sucked into Cloak's void. Wow, that's really extraordinary,
Yeah,
man.
and and the thing is is that we know later on it's not a nightmare that you have of your fear per se, a core fear you have. It's the fear of some evil that you've done. It's sort of like your guilt. I mean that's what I got from when people
Yeah.
get sucked in this thing. So I'm like, oh, this guy, he has to be a Nazi. He has
Yeah,
to
well,
be.
or maybe he was someone who escaped the Nazis, like you say. I think it could be either. I mean, to hear Dagger describe it 2 pages later, when everyone comes out of the Cloak sort of void, and Cloak says, like, he's about to say, "Oh, sorry about that. I kind of got carried away," and Dagger says, "Sorry." Cloak, you get mad at the priest, and then you torment these poor, helpless people by forcing them to face their worst nightmares, real or imagined, inside your darkness. So your worst nightmares, real or imagined. So Mantlo's giving himself an awful lot of leeway there, which is cool. That's fine, but it's like real or imagined. So it could have been a real memory, or it could have been a fear, right? Like that was the guy's worst fear. That's so interesting that that's what the void of Cloak's darkness can represent. And man, that's a hell of a power that he's got inside that cloak there.
Yes, but see, the thing is, it's like when he puts the priest in, and the priest sees like the end of days, and he's kind of like, oh, this is like it's just an interesting thing with that Nazi little thing in there.
Well,
But
well, yeah. Well, the priest, to be specific too, the priest sees what he sees when he goes into his worst nightmare inside of Cloak's void. That it is this the evil, he says, that exists within the cloak of darkness? The age of man ends, and he's in this post-apocalyptic kind of hellscape with all these skeletons reaching out for him. And it says the age of man ends, and there is no God to redeem sinners. It is a vision such as would come to a man without faith, a vision of Father Francis Delgado's own private Hades. And it is pretty horrific looking the way they draw it, but yeah, so the priest is picturing a godless apocalypse,
yeah,
and there is no god, there is no afterlife. I mean, this is fucking heavy stuff, man, for a comic book that you're buying off of the fucking liquor store newsstand for 65 cents in 1985. Jesus Christ, Chris. Like 7 year olds. I mean, like, what was it, 85? I mean, I was 8. I probably bought this when I was 8 years old. Like, this is some heavy shit for an 8 year old to buy. And I'm not saying I'm mad about it. I'm glad, because I think that's fine. I got no issue with it. But damn, like, this is a crazy heavy story to just call a superhero comic back when there was newsstand distribution, and you could walk in anywhere for 65 cents, and you think your kid's getting like some fun Superman story, and they're walking home with a comic about child and like priests and godless apocalypses. Like, this is so heavy, it's wild, man. I love it, but man, is this bizarre.
it's bizarre. Now, before we go on to issue 2, there's one thing that I noticed because I thought they were gonna drop this story, but I guess they didn't. Is on page 22, the second panel where it's like, there's a guy who goes, there's something out there, something that's dwelling in the edge of darkness, something stalking our souls. And you see these red eyes in
Oh
the
yeah.
darkness, right? I think in issue 3 or maybe issue 4, those eyes come back. And since we just read through issue 4, I'm assuming that, I don't know, somewhere later on in this 12 issue run, we get to see
Yeah.
who's
Oh,
who's
yes.
existing
Yeah.
inside of Cloak's
That's a
darkness that's
yes.
is eating their souls. It's
You're
kind of
right. You're
interesting.
right. That is really interesting. That's a good point because they're red eyes in the darkness there. And yeah, there is another panel later on where we see some sort of shadowy figure again. I noticed that. So yeah, good call. I think that's setting up like a C or a D storyline that'll probably come to the fore in issue, who knows, 5 or 6 or
5 or 6,
7.
you know,
Yeah.
like who knows, but you know, so that's sort of the end of issue 1. I will say
Yeah.
again, like
Yeah.
I would say, like you just pointed out on page 20, is that there's that moment right in the second to last panel where she's saying to Cloak, I can't do this anymore. And then look at his face, at the anguish in his face.
Oh my God, amazing. Great point. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That Leonardi character acting with Terry Austin. This is just next level cartooning. People don't fucking draw this good.
No,
Like,
no.
this is fucking amazing. Cloak looks like he's gonna fall over, like he's so ill, he's sad, he can't live without Dagger, and you can feel it. You can feel the anguish, like you say, just by looking at the way that his body and his cloak is kind of seizing up. I mean, this is really just so phenomenal. And then you look at that awesome lettering there. After Dagger says, "I'm getting out," the very last thing you read is some tremendous calligraphy from the great Ken Bruzenak. And it says, next issue, the end of Cloak and Dagger. And it's huge text with a giant question mark below it. I mean, it's just a really fun, great cliffhanger ending at the end of the first issue. This is a batshit crazy, super fucked up first issue for a comic book. I mean, this is just way more insane than I remembered, and this kind of like floored me to read it. But man, this was just a great read overall, obviously because of the artwork primarily. But yeah, then we get to issue 2, and let me just point out, in case we don't mention it later, that Leonardi draws some great covers, and it's Austin inking, I believe, all of them. There's some really great covers. I think in particular, I don't know which. I was trying to decide which one was my favorite. Um, the first issue has some pretty goofy 1980s looking hoodlums in it, and I
Yeah.
don't know why. I don't know why the fucking comic book hoodlums are always wearing like green vests and like purple pants.
And they got like
Where
chains and shit. They got
like yeah,
like
yeah, and they got chains. It's just such a goofy 80s trope in comics. The guy's got he's got like a sweatband on his wrist there too, a wristband. I think the only thing that we're spared with the thugs, and the hooligans on this first issue cover, we're spared like the, ubiquitous bandana that a lot of like, criminals had in Marvel Comics and like DC Comics in the 80s, where you'd always see the dude with the bandana and that meant he was a criminal. But like, yeah, you got some tropes in some of these hoodlums, but it doesn't take away from the great drawing. I think issue two might be my favorite cover of the 4 that we looked at, just because, man, like, goddamn, that is a graceful Dagger literally dancing across the cover. And look at how how lithe and just dancer like she is, just dancing across the cover. It's just really unusual, and just again, just the figure work is just really has so much personality to it. The Leonardi's figure work has such personality to the way he draws the human figure. It's like, it's really just wonderful cartooning, and I'm just gonna keep saying this over and over because it's just so good.
well the thing I love about him too is, I pointed this out one time when we did the question with Dennis Cowan,
Yeah.
is that he doesn't shortcut the faces.
No,
All
not
the
at all.
faces have their own kind of head shape, own kind of personality, own. I mean, if you look at the cover of this, those 2
Yeah.
guys who are orange in the front, it's like they look like, like
Yeah.
it's just like totally different type of people. He's so
Yes.
good at that. He's so good at all of this. It's
Yeah.
I mean, and then we jump inside and we meet the father, the Philip Carlisle, who's the
Yeah.
stepdad, and that that first panel of his face
Yeah.
up close. He looks like
Yeah.
no one else we've seen in the whole book at all.
No, no, not at all, not at all. And Leonardi is no slouch when it comes to drawing regular clothing. Because check out that jacket that
Yeah.
the dad's wearing. That's like a really well thought out jacket, and even the over the shoulder bag, like it's some great specific detail. But
Yeah.
just the folds and the draping on the jacket. I mean, it's really well done, well thought out. He can actually draw people in regular clothes, which obviously, as we know, a lot of superhero artists could not do that.
Do
But
not do, yeah. Yeah.
no, and Chris, just real quick, you mentioned Spider-Man 2099 before, and I just want to point out who the inker was on Leonardi for that whole run was Al fucking Williamson, one of the greatest comic artists of all time.
Yeah.
Right. So when we talk about Rick Leonardi being an artist's artist, Al Williamson would not have inked Rick Leonardi for years, for multiple years, unless he found him to be a suitable and perhaps even inspiring collaborator. And I think that tells you all you need to know about Leonardi, that the two guys who were best known for inking him were Terry Austin and Al Williamson.
Jesus.
For God's sake, I mean, that's like literally arguably the two greatest inkers in comics in the 80s, and they're both inking Rick Leonardi on super lengthy runs. I mean, that says it all, I think, in terms of the respect with which people held Rick Leonardi in his community of fellow artists. And I mean, for good reason, for really good reason.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, here's what's interesting, right? So at the top of issue 2, the priest is driving Dagger. She's now dressed as her Tandy. She's not dressed as, she's not wearing the costume anymore. So I find weird that she's able to not wear the costume.
I know. She suddenly looks like the upper crust, young woman that she is. She still doesn't look 16, frankly, but she looks like she's dressed kind of like a young rich woman, going back to, her upper crust roots. And it's weird because Cloak is still in his costume, and Dagger's wearing just like this kind of square looking, rich girl wear, and she has like a sweater tied around like her shirt, it's like tied around the top like she's about to go yachting or some shit.
Look, let me tell you, at this time in the 85 in Shaker Heights, there was a book that everybody, I remember all these girls had this book. It was called The Preppy Handbook.
Are you serious?
I'm serious, and it was and it was all these ways to dress, to wear topsiders, like to way to like cuff your pants, and
it's so funny.
You definitely wear your like a sweater like tied like that. Like if you remember in the movie Trading Places, there's a scene where Dan Aykroyd goes to a tennis club in there, and it's like the way they're dressed in there. I was like, that is straight out of fucking Shaker Heights High School, right there.
Oh
right
man,
there. It is so funny. So
that's hilarious. Well, Dagger was clearly reading the Preppy Handbook. Because she looks like she fits that bill to a T, and she even says here, "I just want to be normal again." And the priest is driving her back home to have this reunion with her mom, and Cloak's there in the car, looking all cloaked out in the back seat, and it's kind of ridiculous. Like he's in full superhero attire, but they're in this just like really small, shitty car that the priest is driving them in. And Dagger says, "I want to be normal again, Father. Just an average, upper-class 16-year-old girl instead of a costume vigilante. That life brings no joy, only anger and despair amid the filthiest dives of New York. I've helped others with my light. Now I'd like to help myself." So there you go. Dagger lays out her thought process for us there very, very conveniently right before we hear yet another recap of their origin.
Yeah, it's too much, man.
Which is so crazy. We keep hearing it over and over again, and I know that was the rule back then, but I feel like Mantlo took it to an extreme, because I think there were other Marvel comics that would do the recap a little bit more elegantly, but at least in these first couple issues, Mantlo's taking a whole page to recap their origin each time in great detail.
Yeah, it's too much. It's way too much. But the cool thing about these first few pages is what I like is he just draws regular stuff. Like there's the car going through the town, and there's like the little yachts and stuff like that. Like he's drawing like a world that's like a suburban world, which you rarely see in comics, because you're always in like a big city. But superhero stuff, they're usually always in New York or Gotham or Metropolis, something like that. They're not in like, this is like this is in like Long Island somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that where it is? It
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so. And like, I mean, Leonardi and Austin are killing it. Like these very, normal looking, real world backgrounds still look great. For some reason, Glynis Oliver decides to color the highway or the freeway purple, which is kind of an interesting decision on page 4. It looks makes the road look extra surreal there, but otherwise, like, yeah, we're just in the regular world. And man, Leonardi draws great houses, great architecture. I
Yeah,
mean, you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like when they get to the estate, like there's some great shots of these mansions. There's great shots of the boats and the yachts. I mean, yeah, they're not skimping on any of this stuff.
Well, I'll tell you something that's crazy to me, right? What's really crazy, and I hate to say this, but I will say this. On page 7, right?
Yeah,
This shot of the house,
yeah.
that's like a splitting image of the house that I grew up in when I was
Are you
I mean
serious?
I mean, it's I
Whoa.
mean, it's like it's not as wide as that, like, there's 2 parts that jut out, and there's 2 parts that are inside small, and there's double chimneys, but
Mm.
that's kinda like that's the architecture of the house I grew up in. It's just
Whoa,
if
that's
you just
crazy.
kinda push it together a little bit, so it's only, like I mean, like, that looks like it's 5 rooms wide, like, ours was just, like, 3 rooms wide, but that is exactly the type of that English Tudor
Wow.
house. I'm looking at this, I'm like, "God damn, this is, like, too much," it's, like, too much to read. It's just
Oh man,
I don't know.
how surreal! How surreal for you? Because like she comes from Shaker
I know
Heights,
that's what
and
I'm saying,
I
that's what I'm
know, and
saying,
she
and I'm
comes
like, this is
you
so
have a real connection to Dagger. This is crazy.
so crazy, it's so crazy. But something I wanted to bring out about Dagger, which is interesting, as much and I think this is, like, his style, as much as he draws her with this semi the uniform has that big cutout in the dagger, she's not overly sexualized in the way that she's
No,
drawn,
no, not at all. No, she just looks graceful. She looks impossibly graceful, like a dancer, and specifically like a ballerina, which is what she was before all this happened. And like I don't know if you noticed, but there's a particular panel coming up somewhere where like they're arguing with the priest or they're doing something, and I just happened to notice that Dagger was standing on her tippy toes in the panel, and like there's a name for that. I forget what the name is, but it's like reveille, or it's like something that like a ballet dancer does, when you're standing on your tippy
Oh,
toes.
yeah, yeah,
And like,
yeah.
yeah, and like what a fucking great detail for Leonardi to do that just like while she's in a normal scene. And I just happen to look down at her feet and I'm like, oh, she's standing like a ballerina dancer in the middle of this discussion. Again, it's the character acting. And then honestly, I think it's even on one of the covers. I feel like he does it on one of the covers too. Actually, you know what? It's in the cover box on issue number 1, Chris. If you look at the cover box, the Marvel cover box in the top left corner of issue number 1, which is it's actually a really awesome little cover box, this one specifically. And if you look on that first issue, she's doing it in the cover box.
Yeah,
She's standing on
yeah.
her tippy toes like what she is, a dancer. I mean, that is just such exquisitely thoughtful character drawing, And it's like Rick Leonardi never forgets who they are and kind of how to express it through how they're posed, how they're standing, how they're looking. Just so thoughtful and just so well done, every little detail.
Yeah, so just to get back to the story,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
as soon as we get, so they're driving out to Long Island to meet Dagger's mom, who is at a modeling shoot at some place that is in the rich area of Long Island. It's on the coast somewhere, and it says there's a party for New York's cognoscenti spills over from house to the landscape of the lawn. And I'm like, man, this is. But the crazy thing is, these little bad teenagers remind me of some of the bad kids that it's like that, like some of the bad like white kids that I knew when I was growing up. It's
Oh
like,
wow.
yeah, they
No
had too much
shit.
money and they just didn't like it, and they acted crazy. And like, I remember this one kid, man, like he screamed at his mom in front, like got dropped off at school and like screamed at his mom, and like the word was that he had punched his mom one time, and I was like, this I sit there like I couldn't believe, but he was like he was sort of like a wealthy family, but I just but so so
Damn.
the story is at this mansion where Dagger's mom is, like where they're going, there's these four kids who are being neglected by their parents, and they decide to take a Rolls Royce and go fucking and do them joyride,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
actually don't even know how to drive, but they
No.
they burn across the lawn, they crash through a gate, and he says some funny line. He's like, "Hey, can you drive?" He goes, "Well, I got my learner's permit." And then all this shit happens. They're screeching and zooming and blah blah blah. They smash the gate, and then they're driving the road. He goes, "But I never actually, like drove." Is what it says. And I'm like, "What the fuck is this, man? This is crazy."
Yeah.
So then these crazy kids, these spoiled rich kids, they drive to the um where do they drive? They drive to the pier, and
Yeah.
they look at, like all the boats, like I guess the family's friends, a lot of them came by boat. So these
Yeah.
kids go crazy. They go out to the boat in like a dinghy, which is another cool shot. The way that's painted. What's that? That's
Yeah.
on page 15. Or is that 15 or 10? And it's like it's just that they're all oranged out. That's
Oh, yeah. 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 Great coloring. Great coloring when
coloring,
they're
man. Just
oh, so good.
and it's so dope because then he doesn't need the detail is like kind of refined down to just like shadows and shapes.
Yeah.
Like no, it's goddamn, this is
Yeah,
so
yeah, and
good.
I love the lights. Like if you look at the lights behind them, the way the lights are just kind of like all these like really fractured, kind of scratchy lines, and
Yeah,
then there's a whole, and there's a whole bunch of cross hatching at the very top of that panel. Like that panel right there, like we'll feature that panel. Just like it's just an exquisite panel, and it's like not the most exciting panel, just some kids in a dinghy, going out to a boat. But man, does that look perfectly composed?
it's amazing. It's absolutely
Yeah,
amazing. And then these kids like they get on a boat and then they go below deck and then they crash a boat into someone else's boat, because they're like, what the fuck? Like we're just like they're basically it's interesting thinking about this now. It's sort of like they're behaving in the way of they have the same sense of neglect that Dagger had,
yes,
which gave her the impetus to run away.
right,
These kids are just acting out the same way, but they're just like fucking up their parents' shit.
yeah.
And and they crash that boat and they go into this guy's boat and they go, below decks and there's all this alcohol was spilled and they just light it on fire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And to be clear, it's one of the kids' father's boats.
Yeah.
So yeah, so he's just like, yeah, well, dad's clients get thirsty when he takes them sailing to discuss business deals. Seeing him sail home drunk always used to like burn me up. The kid says that as he lights a match, over all this like, all these broken alcohol bottles. And then it's like, woo, holy smokes, you said it, pal. Well, we wanted their attention. We're gonna get it now, and they just fucking light this boat on fire. And I gotta say, by the way, we just spent 6 pages with these spoiled rich kids who we just met and we're probably never gonna see again. That's a freaking quarter of the story pages for this whole issue. We spent 6 full pages with these kids. It's kind of crazy how much time is given to them, and like it's well done, and certainly Leonardi and Austin make the most of it, but it's also just a kind of a curious story decision to leave Cloak and Dagger for 6 pages in the middle of their second issue.
Well, yes, but it goes back to what I was saying earlier about like he doesn't balance story stuff right because I would have wanted like 3 pages
Right, right.
no, in the previous issue on those girls who were in the
Oh,
sex
yes.
trafficking thing.
Mm-hmm,
It's like
mm-hmm. Yes,
how'd
that
you
would have
do
been much more dramatic and appropriate. Yeah, it's some really curious kind of story math. The way that Mantlo is allotting the page real estate to certain characters who, frankly, don't deserve that much page real estate, and the way he's allotting almost zero page real estate to things that are just objectively more fascinating or characters that really deserve a lot more space because, yeah, they're more compelling. Yeah, so it just yeah, very interesting and kind of curious decisions across the board from Mantlo. But then we go back to Cloak and Dagger, and they are still driving to go see Dagger's mom. and then they suddenly see the fire on this boat, and this causes Cloak to convince Dagger, hey, I know you're over this whole superhero thing, but yo, people need our help over here. Let's go help them.
Yeah.
And so Dagger's like, all right, let's do this. And so the priest is like, no, Dagger, you're past this life. You can't do this. But Cloak's like, see ya. And then he teleports them out of there. And they go, over to the kids who just set this fire. And they're like, hey, we just heard you guys confess. We know what you did. And we're going to essentially tattle on you. We're going to go tell your parents. And Dagger realizes, oh, these kids have the same anger, like you were saying, the same anger that I had coming from this this neighborhood, so I know what it's like. And so she's like deciding she wants to go and tell the kids folks what happened here. And so that's the decision that she's going to make. What she doesn't realize is that they are coming from a party at the same house that happens to belong to her mom.
Yeah, she does. I mean, it's interesting, and she gets upset at Cloak for what she wants to do, and she throws those daggers into him from behind, before he can suck those kids into the darkness of his cloak. And then she's like, you can't do that to them. Like you can't destroy them. But she asks this interesting question. She's like, she says, I need to stop existing like this, and so do you. And there's only one way to see if we can change. She's basically saying to see if I can go back. Well, no, it's to let these kids off and to let these kids turn themselves in, but at the same time, that's when the party gets discussed, and they're like, look, we're see, here's the thing, right? They're basically getting emotionally abused by their parents by being like if they get ignored like this. And this is interesting because they're teenagers where they want to be adults and they want to find out who they are in their own personality, but they kind of need their parents around to kind of help them navigate all that.
Yeah,
The parents are like, yeah, fuck you. We're about to get drunk and high, and you have to deal with your own shit. And it's interesting. It's an interesting way to see why these kids, misbehave the way they do.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that one thing we should give Mantlo credit for, just as we were saying that maybe he doesn't really seem to know how to write the Cloak character in a way that gives full freight to his humanity, etc. I think Mantlo is doing clearly a much better job writing Dagger's character and kind of the world that Dagger comes from.
For sure.
With you know what I mean? With a much higher degree of verisimilitude, as evidenced by your own fucking testimony to, growing up around a lot of kids like this, and the fact that this, storyline is reminding you of some of those kids. I mean, I think we can give Bill Mantlo, fair props for that.
For sure.
He's doing
for sure.
a lot better, with this issue.
Well,
so that's good to see that at least.
Well, to see, and you know what? I'll take that one further. He also doesn't caricaturize the rich, because a lot of times people how a lot of times we see like Harry Osborn and the son, like Harry and Norman Osborn, like you see those in the comics a lot of times, or just people who have money. They're kind of characterized like they're stereotypes, in a certain way, and this way they're not. And there are these 4 kids, there's a girl and 3 boys. They all sort of have their own distinct personality in a way in terms of what they're trying to do. I mean, they're all kind of like behaving not like this bad, but like Alex from Clockwork Orange. But they've been kind of pushed to that anger of being degenerate, and they're not really that way. But so that's where he does get this right in a really interesting way.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. And I'm glad you said that. And I think that's something we do try to do on the show, is hopefully present a balanced perspective. We're not trying to just criticize any creator, just to kind of be a jerk or whatever. We're trying to actually give an accurate sort of picture and really take this work seriously. And that's the whole point that our show exists, is we believe this work deserves to be taken seriously. And we're trying to reckon with it from a modern perspective, which at times is going to be critical, although generally not that much on our show, because we are specifically choosing comics that we love, or, in this case, at least we love one aspect of this, the artwork. And we're trying to be fair to the writing, but also, it's worth discussing because Mantlo is also doing something that was very original and progressive in its way for this time frame. And, like we've talked about a lot on the show, sometimes when you're a trailblazer, a groundbreaker, maybe you don't get everything right. Maybe everything's not perfect. We talked about like Pete Milligan and Screamer. We loved Screamer overall, but the characterization of like the woman character and the black character, in that storyline, was also the main characters. You had Screamer and he had his black best friend, and then his
Dutch was
woman,
his name.
Dutch,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Dutch, and then the woman, I forget what her name was, but like, Milligan didn't characterize those characters in a way that was as fully formed as the way he handled other things, and so that was flawed from our vantage point today. But still, Screamer had a lot going for it, just like Cloak and Dagger also was pushing the ball forward in some ways, and it didn't succeed on every front, but I guarantee Cloak and Dagger inspired a lot of storytellers and a lot of people to push the envelope even more and to do better stories, frankly. And I think that's important. That is important to recognize. Even if someone's not 100% successful and they don't write Watchmen, doesn't mean the work is not worth analyzing or discussing.
But see, you're absolutely right on every level. I think the one thing that is that's sort of not, this is sort of I don't want to say the failure of this, but it's like it's sort of is in a way, but something that we still have to give a lot of props to is this is one of the original. It's one of the few original black superheroes. If you think about it, you have Black Panther, you have Falcon, you have you've got Power Man, you got Power Man, and you have you got Cloak. Like those are. I mean, there may be a version of Goliath who's black, but not the original Goliath. And I think there's another. There's also the guy who becomes Iron Man, like James Rhodes, but
Rhodey,
but he's not an original hero. But in terms of like, Falcon and Black Panther and Power Man, of this era, you have Cloak as the next like original black hero at the time. I just think that he's not, but he's written in a way where he's more like he's more representational of where they've become, that where they are. Like he's a philosophy, like more than a person who's struggling with where they are, the way the Dagger is. And honestly, I think like here's a simple way to have solved this, right? As Mantlo or anybody, he just could have read the book called Native Son by Richard Wright, and he would have had a full kind of his understanding of black life would have been like, oh my God, because I'm writing a kid who's escaping something, and it's like, I mean, he could have read that, or he could have read, and that's maybe a little harder, Invisible Man, which is like one of the greatest books of the 20th century. But
no, 100%, it totally is.
It just would have been that simple to have done, and then all of a sudden he would have given this guy just like a little more. Because here's the thing that we don't get it, like this episode where she's going to Long Island to meet her mom or something like that. How cool like is this book gonna be? And it might do this later on. I don't know, we haven't read that far. Do they go to Boston to find his parents, to find his
I hope they do. I hope they do, and I hope that Mantlo proves us wrong by suddenly leveling up his writing of Cloak. And if that's the case, we will say that if we ever revisit Cloak and Dagger on this show. So we're obviously just talking about these particular 4 issues that we read, but I really hope that Cloak's background and his family is explored with similar kind of depth and hopefully just better. I hope Mantlo does get better with that.
I hope he does too. But the only thing I will say is that in every appearance of Cloak that I recall outside of this book, when he shows up in other books, he still has that stoic kind of like cipher kind of personality when someone else writes him. So it's like it's very much like, oh, that's how we have to view him, because it's so strong that he's like, I don't have a personality of my old self anymore. I'm sort of like this angel of retribution, and that's where I am.
Or a demon of retribution, as the way that the priest literally
shitting on him.
He calls him a demon. I mean, I'm like, dude, this is a fucking 17-year-old kid. You're calling him a demon?
Wow.
Because he got fucked up by some evil drug dealers who tried to kill him. Like, it's just, it's really wild. But I should also point out here, just on a much lighter note, on page 15, and no pun intended in terms of a lighter note, but I'm talking about daggers, her daggers of light, quote unquote, that she throws at people, which is part of her superpower. I just want to point out, Chris, on page 15, that for some reason, Leonardi and Austin, they're not drawing these things to look like daggers. They look like snow cones. They look like, like they look like melted ice cream that's, being thrown by Dagger. Look on page 15.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bottom of 15 there, and she throws those daggers like toward Cloak and the kids. Like those they never look like daggers. They look like these weird melty ice cream cones. And it's an odd decision because they're called her daggers of light. I don't know why they wouldn't have just drawn them as angular daggers. It would have looked cooler, but for some reason they've chosen this other visual.
They feel sort of like lances with energy around them, like a ball of energy around them. But I do agree with what you're saying, because it's just supposed to be that. It's supposed to. I mean, that's why her name is Dagger. So.
Yeah, you're calling them daggers of light. Why does it look like she's like fucking flinging frosty, melty ice cream at these people? Yeah. Like it's really just, it should be angular. That's just an odd decision. I mean, in a book that's visually, almost perfect in our estimation, that's one just, just very strange choice. But okay, so having said that, Dagger goes to basically tattle on these kids to their parents about them being, the ones who lit this boat on fire. Little does she realize, as she kind of barges her way into this super wealthy estate that says property of Nathaniel Wingard, or it says, wow, I thought it was Wingard, but I'm looking at it now. It says
Winograd.
It says Winograd. Yeah, what kind of name is that? Winograd. Okay, whatever. That's strange. But so Dagger barges into the estate and she goes to confront the parents and tell them what's happened. And it turns out, oh my God, first of all, everyone's hitting on her, even though, of course, she's 16, but everyone's hitting on her. All these like creepy, drunken, rich people at the party who were like, fashionista kind of fashion type of people. They're all like, hey, you looking for good times, bad times? We got any kind of times you want. You got the things we want. Oh, yes, indeed. So like everybody at this party is like a super creeper creeping on 16-year-old Dagger. She's horrified. She's like, get away from me. You're all drunk, stoned, and disgusting. And then suddenly we see the leader of the whole crew throwing the party. It's Dagger's mom. Oh dear, I know that voice. Tandy, dearest, what a pleasant surprise. Mom, are these your friends? And then this is where we find out Dagger's mom really is like the biggest bitch in the world. She says, of course, these are my friends, darling. Do you like them? They like you. Let me introduce you to everyone. This is my dear daughter, Tandy Bowen. Such a sweet young thing, isn't she? She was given everything money could buy, anything a child could want. And do you know how she repaid her stepfather and I? She ran away from home. That's how. And the other party guests are like, the little ingrate. Tell us, Melissa. And Dagger's like, mother, why are you trying to humiliate me in front of these people? And her mom says, humiliate you? You selfish, Tandy. That's what you are. It's what you've always been. Did you ever stop to think of how humiliated I would be with your running away? All the talk I had to endure about how I must have mistreated you. And the expense involved, private detectives, newspaper advertisement. Like, so she just keeps going off, and it's so just nuts that this is the way her mom is responding to her run.
She's such a narcissist. It's
such an unbelievable, over-the-top narcissist. This is how she's responding to her 16-year-old runaway coming home. And Dagger flips out, understandably, and says, Mother, she's crying. She says, Mother, stop talking, Mother. For once in your life, shut up and pay some attention to me. And she suddenly uses her light powers, and they fucking knock out everybody.
And this is a dope page. This is like the way it's shown, because it's like there's like those 5 little like those
so good
cutaway panels, everything like
yes,
it's so amazing. But, So here's something I want to point out to you about this thing that your boy named Bruzenak does. Okay, so if you look at the first panel on page 21. If you look at the mom's second balloon, right? See how her hand is overlaying on top of the speech balloon like that?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of cool because usually the balloon would be on top of the art, but now he put it behind it like that.
Wait, hold on. Wait, what page is that on?
This is on page 21. The first panel where the mom is like, did you ever stop to think about how humiliated I would be by you running away, right? If you jump down to the next balloon, the next word balloon, the dialogue balloon, see how her hand is sticking out and it's sticking out like over the dialogue like that? Like that's kind of cool.
Yes, that actually is super cool, and you're right. That's really interesting. That is really really interesting. And Bruzenak, yeah, Bruzenak is amazing, and like so many of these choices are just so smart, just really really smart.
This
Wow.
is this
Um,
see this is great. Okay,
Yeah,
what
such good. Oh, it's such good cartooning. And on 22, like after everyone's knocked out, and then the panel with her mom
yeah, I
lying
was just
fucked
gonna
up on the
say. I was
ground.
gonna say.
That's nuts, man. Leonardi and Williamson went to town. They fucked this woman up. Like Dagger really hit her hard. Her mom looks like she had a heart attack, and she's on the ground just looking like she's about to die. Like it looks so in her fur coat with her jewelry everywhere. And then Cloak's cloak is it's cloaking. His cloak is really cloaking on this
I know,
page. I mean,
it's
this
so
is like
cool.
super, super McFarlane. I mean, Todd McFarlane must have put this
Stole
page
this.
up in
He
his
look,
yeah. Oh my
he had
God,
this
he put this page. Oh,
oh,
it was up in his art studio, man. When he drew Batman Year Two, the 2 issues he drew, McFarlane was looking at Leonardi's cloak. There's no way he wasn't. Just the same way he was looking at Katsuhiro Otomo panels for backgrounds on Spider-Man. You know, McFarlane's no dummy, man. He took inspiration from great people. And yeah, this is just a beautiful. This is one of my favorite pages, page 22.
oh, absolutely,
Just
absolutely,
so great, right?
absolutely.
Just amazing. What a page.
It's just
And
4 panels and it's like,
yeah,
pow! It's so
oh,
good.
so powerful. Just
What's
so
great is
visually powerful.
the thing I love about this last panel is it's all white, like all white background as Cloak is kind of like consoling her. But then the
Yeah,
the last image, the last piece of thought on the page is the priest coming in the door, and we just kind of catch the outline of the door and him coming in
yeah,
saying no, and it's like the rest of it is all white. Like that's like a very
yeah.
like great choice of like, hey,
Yes.
we're isolated, but he's trying to break in, but he just can't.
That's a
You
great
know?
point, Chris. You're right. The visual language there, and this is what I mean too. It's such sophisticated visual storytelling. It really is. And like it's a weird juxtaposition with the writing being, just a little bit more ham-fisted and a little more on the nose for most of the story, but the art really kind of pulls back and uses these really just beautifully like well thought out and smart storytelling choices, because right here this is not an example of an artist choosing to avoid drawing backgrounds because
No,
they're
no.
lazy. They're lazy and they don't want to draw backgrounds. We can tell very clearly that Leonardi and Austin are the opposite of lazy. They've drawn the fuck out of backgrounds for most of these comics, but here they're very specifically dropping out the background to convey the loneliness of kind of this space
Exactly.
for Dagger, right? And it's like
Exactly. Exactly.
cloak, and yeah, and his cloak is the only thing that she has that's giving her solace and comfort. And like you described, the priest is trying to break into that and he can't, and she's gone back to Cloak has gone back, Dagger rather has gone back to being with Cloak, and they're reunited. So I mean, what extraordinary storytelling, just really again masterclass. And so then, I mean, ultimately you could have ended the issue there, but you got just a couple more beats going on. Dagger's stepfather is looking for her. He catches a glimpse of her as she disappears. That's kind of putting some more stuff in motion for the future. And then we cut back to the subplot, which is probably the most boring part of these issues to me, is like the cop who's like the one honest cop back in the police department who's trying to like help, figure out what's going on with you Cloak and Dagger and this drug bust, and Detective Riley. I don't know. Riley. I didn't really care about the storyline, but we keep cutting back to it. And then at the end, we get a final shot of Cloak and Dagger returning to the city, and it says the city, for all its inhabitants, is a strangely solitary place, a place where people can be lost in their loneliness together. And then we see Cloak and Dagger once again back
Appear.
in New York City. And I gotta say, hey, credit where credit is due. That's a really nice, elegant final 4 panels from Bill Mantlo, kind of poetically ending this issue. So, Mantlo's doing some good stuff here too. And yeah, that's issue number 2 of Cloak and Dagger. And man, this is just really, it's all just such interesting stuff. There's so much going on here.
Issue number 3. Okay, so Spider-Man makes his appearance in this, and what I
Yes.
think I'm not sure if you've noticed this, but I guess you have not. Maybe I'll ask you. So, when Marvel or DC would put out a book with a new character or start launch whatever something is, they would put one of their flagship people in, like, one of the first 3 issues of my 4 issues to kinda, like, I guess, drive sales, right?
Yeah, you know what? You're totally right. That is a technique that they would absolutely do on the second or third issue of a new title. And it's really smart because that is the point where the sales start to drop dramatically after the first issue. You know, the first issue always gets great sales, and it's issues 2, 3, and 4 where the sales just crater. And we saw that exact same technique being used by DC Comics with their reboot of The Question by Dennis Cowan and Dennis O'Neil that we covered on our channel, last year. And I think it was like what, issue 4 or 5, where Batman suddenly paid Vic Sage a little visit in The Question, and it was kind of a funny, random thing that happens in the middle of that first Question story arc. And I'm sure that was there for the exact reason you're saying, to goose the sales and keep the sales from flagging too much on a new
Yeah.
title. So I'm sure it's smart strategy.
Yeah, it's that to raise visibility. I mean, I think the thing that made me think about it the most is, before we get back to episode 3, is I used to see in, like, the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s, this was sort of made me get sick of this character. I'd see, like, Wolverine show up in all sorts of books. I'm kinda
Yes.
like, "This guy, why is he showing up, man? I don't wanna see that much of him." Um, but let's jump into issue 3, which is, and again, a great fucking cover.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I really like, but you know what, they were they has that green jacket on, the one guy, which I think is lovely. So
And purple, and a purple sweatshirt next to him. Like these thugs dress in some very colorful gear. Someone's wearing like a fuchsia shirt on the
I
cover
know,
too, who's like
just
holding
crazy.
holding a gun, like fuchsia and purple. Like who is fucking outfitting these thugs, man? This is kind of crazy fashion sense. But yeah, it is a great cover still, where you see Cloak and Dagger and Spidey, lovingly drawn by Leonardi and Austin, swooping down onto the criminals.
This is great. Okay, so this issue begins, and we're inside of a church, and these criminals are planning a drug, not a drug deal, but a drug shipment is coming in. And
Yes.
it's kind of cool because they say, it's weird, but it's crazy. They're like, this one guy says, "Quiet, you fools. Maybe the cops clear, the cops that they cleared out this place like years ago, but the place may have ear, but the walls like what may have ears." And then it follows this like bug like around the piping and stuff like that to a sub basement where there are cops listening.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Well, this was like a confusing page because you're totally right. It looks like a church because you're looking at this incredible kind of giant page of like architecture that's drawn. It's like the top half of the page is this huge panel that's like the very church looking building. But then when you read the text, it says 6 p.m. in an abandoned police station in lower Manhattan. So it's kind of funny. They're saying that the cops were using this church like building previously, but they've abandoned it. But then you find out in the building's sub basement at the bottom of the page that there's some cops there, and they have actually tapped the building because somehow I guess they knew that criminals were going to come use this place. And the cop in the basement is saying, "So a meeting of church fathers to plan a religious festival reveals itself to be a cover for a drug smuggling ring. One slip and we've got them on tape. Keep the recorder running. We don't want to miss a word." So yeah, again, it's not exactly the most naturalistic dialogue, and it's a little bit convoluted. Like there's a lot going on page 1.
yeah, I mean, but I mean, it's weird because there's a lot going on, like dialogue wise, but the art is still like is told very, very. See, what's cool about the way that the panels are laid out is we come in and we see these guys at the table. Next panel over is the bug, and then the
Yes.
bug takes us to the wire, and and then
Yeah.
the wire reads from right to left as opposed to us reading left to right. Takes us down like it's a really kind of it kind of zigzags us like our eye is follows a convoluted path,
Yeah.
which is cool, but it's a clear convoluted path, which
Hmm.
I think is kind of smart. And again, it did the cool thing in the last panel on this, where it's like the guys in the foreground are just one color, Cloak and Dagger in the background are fully colorized. Again, they're using like this great like they're using color to kind of give dimensionality, which a lot of times people don't do that much. I think it's really done well, like in this book.
Oh yeah, 100%. And again, props to Glynis Oliver. I believe later Glynis Wein, the colorist. And Glynis Oliver, we should mention also, she colored some of Frank Miller's classic Daredevil run as well. I was just looking at a page recently that was like one of the really well-known Daredevil pages, and it was like really audacious and beautiful color. And when I looked at the color credit, it was Glynis Oliver. So again, a real unsung hero from the 80s, Glynis Oliver, just killing the color work. And I think her and Christy Scheel and Lynn Varley and Richmond Lewis were, I think, some of the women of the 80s who just made comics look aesthetically, visually so gorgeous and like sophisticated in terms of the color application, and don't really get enough credit at all. Some of them have left comics completely. I think at this point all of them have. Some of them were only in comics for a minute, but man, there is some beautiful coloring coming out of the mainstream comics houses in the 80s, and a lot of it was being done by these brilliant women colorists. And so that's just something I think that's worth noting.
Yeah, because every time you look at the original pages, the non-colored pages, the art looks cool.
Yeah.
But what we know of comics is the colored pages. Like it's very
Yeah.
rare for us to see or to own or to have the black and like the original art, which is kind of cool. How we get you get the artist editions to see all that stuff the way originally done. But again, but that's not what we see.
Well, especially back then,
Yeah,
like back then it was like you never saw the original art. So yeah, they were the ones. I mean, the color version was the definitive record for decades for most of us.
it was, and it's crazy that like. I hate the fact when you get trades now and they recolored from
Oh
old stuff.
God, I hate it so much. I
It's like
hate it. I hate it.
terrible, and I don't know. I mean, I wonder what those colorists think when they see that work.
Oh, they're pissed. I think they're really pissed. And probably the greatest single resource for all of this that I know of is Jose Villarrubia, the brilliant colorist who's colored a lot of Alan Moore stories. And I think he did the coloring. He handled the definitive recoloring, I think, on the Bernie Wrightson Swamp Thing, kind of one of the absolute editions. But I mean, Villarrubia is a genius colorist, and he's one of the best follows on Facebook because he does this feature. You've probably seen this on Facebook, or I might have sent you a couple of them, where like he will compare the original coloring with the recoloring of things from like the originals to the trades, and how virtually every single time it's exactly what you're saying. Like the colors are dramatically worse. They just look so awful in the recoloring. And then, and the comment section goes crazy with people being like, what the fuck? Why do these companies do this? And I think there's a lot of reasons for it. And it's a little complicated, but I mean, aesthetically, it's horrific.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they can't make it look like. I mean, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
part of it has to do with the paper stock, like the way that the colors would kind of like the way they would sit on newsprint was different.
Yes.
And so when you've got the glossy white paper that people are accustomed to now, you can't quite get the exact same color or the same effect. And the color guides that they used before, they don't quite work the same way. And like, I think there's some translation issues. Some of it has to do with paper stock. Some of it has to do with just preference. Like they think that people want the colors to look more modern, almost like a colorized film. They want them to have like, all the gradations and like the bells and whistles of fancy computer coloring that to me look like shit by and large compared to the old flat coloring. But I think there is this perception that flat coloring equals old comics, and we want this to look new and fancy with computer coloring, but it almost always looks like fucking garbage when they recolor these books. And it's such a tragedy. And that's why I think it's been really heroic to see Jose Villarrubia really kind of pointing out these like incredible miscarriages of justice, coloring wise, and to get a lot of people kind of noticing it and upset about it. And hopefully the word will filter back to the companies and we'll see more, careful or fidelitous jobs being done, because these original colorists, frankly, they deserve better because they did such phenomenal work back then. And I think I would rather see, and I think you would rather see, and most fans would rather see, frankly, just really high quality scans of the fucking newsprint pages with the original colors. Like, I would rather see that than some like god awful recoloring on glossy white paper. You know, like fuck that. Just give us
Well,
the
but
original color.
see, that's the thing. There's that one Batman. Is it the Absolute Batman Year One that does that? If you get that,
Oh
you get
yeah, that's
this-
amazing.
Yeah, that looks amazing.
So good, so
And
good.
and it's like, but and isn't it like newsprint also like?
Yeah, they did. I think that was because Mazzucchelli and Richmond Lewis got to be in charge of sort of like watching over that. And yes, you're right. One of those, like, because they reprint Batman Year One in a couple different forms with the different colors in 2 editions. It's like the double slipcase with the hardcovers. Yeah, and you're right. One of them is like literally the newsprint.
Yeah, and that looks.
It's amazing.
Like, it looks so juicy. Like, oh my god, like who? Like, this is what it's supposed. I remember looking at it when I got it like a year or two ago. I was like, oh, this is what it was. This is what it was.
Yeah,
like, not to know, like it's the thing. Like, yeah, it's like, oh man, it's terrible.
So weird.
So terrible. But this like double page splash opens up the book here. The page 2 or 3 is it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is
amazing.
Oh man, whoever owns that original art is fucking stoked, because that is one hell of a double page splash, man. That is insane how good that is.
Pretty amazing. I think you know what's cool about this? I'm looking at Dagger, the way that she's colored. I love the way that I guess like it is Glynis Oliver. She has that she uses like the little sky blue to add the volume, like on her arm.
Oh yeah, just barely. You're right. It's so subtle. I didn't notice it.
Just like, here's how I get it to feel volumetric without me having to use like like hash marks or anything like that.
Damn, that is so cool. I did not notice that till you said it, man.
Yeah, it's really fucking cool. Like, this is an amazing thing.
You know what else I'm noticing now looking at that? Now, as you point that out, look at the line work around Dagger's body in the middle of the blackness of Cloak's cloak.
Oh, yeah, it's glowing. Yeah.
Yeah, you see how she's glowing, and there's these like really, and I think it's it's Leonardi and Austin doing this part, but it's like there's these really interesting ripply lines kind of emanating around Dagger amidst the blackness of the cloak in the background. And yeah, Dagger is just very faintly glowing, so she's not fully swallowed up by Cloak's darkness visually, and she's got this very subtle glow, and you can see it kind of coming off of her feet too, as almost like speed, and her legs as like speed lines when she's in motion. And again, it's like such subtle line work, but it's there, and you're right, it adds so much, all these little details. Just amazing work.
It's really, really good. It's really, really good. So issue 3 is called Lost and Found, which is a cool font too for the title. I love the way that's executed.
Yep.
So Cloak and Dagger, they go in and they bust up this drug thing before the cops can get there, and they discover that there's a drug shipment and it's going to be at the docks somewhere. It's we were talking about this offline just briefly about the origin of this, like it's from the drug war, and how it's kind of critical about this issue about like, is it too? See, this is where it's weird. It's like, I remember in that article we were reading that they were saying that like it doesn't work because there's no rogues gallery, and also it's their origin is too steep in the drug war.
Oh, Cloak and Dagger don't have like a proper rogues gallery like Spider-Man or Batman or whatever.
But see, this is where we were talking earlier about like, do they need that if they could go deeper into like the grittiness of the drug world?
I think you're right, because if they were able to do this, like you said before, as like an epic book, or if it was a Vertigo book or an independent book, yeah, you could go more into the grimy, filthy underworld shit, and that would kind of make up for the lack of a traditional, rogues gallery of villains. But you're right, they're kind of in this weird, awkward, uncanny valley. They're neither this thing nor that thing. They're right in the middle of like superheroes versus, Vice Squad. And it is kind of it's got a little awkwardness to it. And I should mention, by the way, that the article you're referencing was an article all about Rick Leonardi and his career that we found on the Comics Journal website, written by Tegan O'Neil. And the article, for anyone who's curious, was titled Murderer's Row. And it was a fascinating examination of the career of Rick Leonardi and a celebration of his incredible talent.
And we'll try to put that in the show notes if you're listening on whatever on. We'll put it in the show notes. Put it in the show
Yeah,
notes.
for sure.
It's a good article. Because the thing also is that because something about, do you remember we were saying like the first issue when they were in front of that shop where the peep show shop,
Yeah.
that one panel kind of, it looked sort of like a version of Sin City.
Yes.
See this, like these characters need like a Sin City type of treatment, in terms of like that kind of story, because that story is just a regular story of like a murder.
Right.
That first, it's not. I mean, and it's so powerful, like, and it doesn't need all that sensationalism of like a rogues gallery. But,
Right.
but I say that because it's like these drug dealers are cool villains, but they're not hardcore enough. And the thing that I'm kind of lamenting is, what was the villain's name? Was it the White Mist? Was that his name in the first? Remember there was
yeah, in like the origin story
the
for
origin
Cloak
story,
and Dagger.
yeah.
Yeah, right. And the original miniseries, which we did not read for this episode.
Yeah, but it feels like you have a cool villain potentially. I don't know. I'm just
No. You're totally right, though. I mean, this is just like, it's like, it goes back to like screenwriting type of shit too. Like we talk about this all the time. It's like, your hero is only as good as their villain, right? And they've got to be, evenly matched. Or if anything, the villain's got to be way stronger because your hero's got to be a super underdog. But it can't feel like your hero's just shooting ducks in a barrel, which frankly is kind of what it feels like when Cloak and Dagger go against, Grimy Thug #1, Grimy Thug 2, and Grimy Thug 3, because it's just like we see it's a beautifully choreographed page here after the splash page, but it's basically like the thugs have guns, but immediately Cloak and Dagger hit them with the old superpowers. And, Dagger's like, you'd kill me if you could, but hey, scum, you don't even deserve my daggers of light. But she still hurls them, and and she's kind of dancing through the fight beautifully, but it's just like bam, 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 and they take them out, no problem. It's not difficult for Cloak and Dagger to take out these villains, quote unquote.
No, they don't, which is interesting. But see, yeah, man, like this is again like look at this, like these two panels or these two rows of panels, the last two rows in this next page,
yeah,
is just like, his art is so good.
Yeah,
it's so telling of the story.
Right. And
like
I mean, I gotta look back at Arthur Adams again, because obviously everyone loves Arthur Adams, and Longshot looked amazing, etc. But Longshot, which again came after Leonardi was doing all this, I wonder if the storytelling in Longshot is as good as this, because I suspect that Leonardi's storytelling is just more elegant and more kinetic, and I think it's got more movement than Arthur Adams' storytelling. And I love Arthur Adams, but I think there's something about the movement that Leonardi and Austin bring to this book that is very rare. Like it's got an incredible energy. Like no matter what page you look at, if they're moving, like they're flying, it's like, it looks like the motion effect is unbelievable in this artwork.
Well, so that's an interesting point you bring up about the motion, because I still remember the opening page of Longshot #1 is a splash panel and he's running directly at us, right? Like he's running like off a train or something like that, and his eyes glowing, and it's like it's a straight front on shot, and in my mind it's a cool shot, and it's great introduction to the character and the little pup demon creature who's with them. They're on the run, but it still feels static in my brain when I think about what is done with, like here in this book. Like there's that level of continual movement, like like Cloak's cape or whatever. Like Cloak's cloak always feels like it's moving. It doesn't matter what shot it is. Like it feels like it's alive and it's like searching around. Like it's pretty fucking dope.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
So the next page is this guy gets sucked up in a Cloak's thing. He sees this You see people who he sold drugs to, but we see those red eyes and one panel in
Yeah,
the middle there.
yeah, right.
See
Those
his
are the ones like you pointed out before, like
yeah.
something is being foreshadowed here. Some creature, some villain, something.
Yeah, which is cool, and this guy just screams as he comes out of, like this panel with the guy. This panel feels like a panel that Arthur Adams stole. This thing with like when Cloak is holding him and his not just Arthur Adams, but who else? This that looks like a that open mouth like looks like a
Oh, like Liefeld?
yeah like a Rob Liefeld type
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
color.
That's
Like
funny you say that because I have also thought like that Leonardi probably was an influence on Liefeld as well. Because I feel like I can see hints of so
yeah
many of these
yeah
like image superstars in Leonardi's work, and I'm sure they would all cop to it. I'm sure they have, but I feel like Silvestri and Liefeld and perhaps even Jim Lee,
McFarlane yeah
McFarlane for sure. Like we talked about. I mean, Jim Lee, perhaps, Arthur Adams, obviously. Yeah, I feel like there probably weren't too many people who were not. Wait, that's like a double negative. There probably were not many people who would say Rick Leonardi was not an influence. I don't know. That's still probably a double negative in that sentence. Anyways, my point being, Leonardi influenced a whole bunch of fucking people. Like that's what he did, and like you can
yeah
tell why.
he
It's
had to
unbelievable. Yeah, yeah,
Al.
yeah.
There's no way he didn't. There's no
Yes.
way. There's no way.
Yeah. I mean, the work is just mind blowing. And I mean, if you compare this to the other art in comics in the mid 80s, with a few exceptions, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but like the typical house style at Marvel and DC was like, I mean, 10 years behind the work that Leonardi's doing here. Like, Leonardi's given you a sneak preview of comics and what they're going to look like and feel like 10 years later because
Yeah.
it's so,
Yeah.
so ahead of the curve.
So ahead of his time. He's so ahead of his time. Here's something that's cool about this panel with with Cloak. He's holding this guy. I kind of love the way his hands are because his
Mm,
hands are all black. Like you don't see the knuckles, but there's a little bit of a hint of like the blue to show like the separation of the two hands of his
yeah.
knuckles of his wrist. Like it's a very like subtle, clever kind of like I guess it was drawn that way because you got to do the knockouts with the black, but
Yeah.
just decide to do that with the coloring too. That's like really dope because
No,
it's hard to do a
I love
character
that.
who's all black like that.
Oh, totally.
Because the thing about like even with Spider-Man when he's in the black costume, his hands they have the white on the top of the wrist to kind of show, so it kind of helps you kind of like give you the sinew, whatever the vein, what are they called? The ligaments. So, I don't know.
Right.
This it's trick to do this with no with just shot. It's just a trick, and again, it's beautiful, and it shows shows what he's able to do as an artist.
Oh yeah,
Um,
100%. And I think I'm glad you keep pointing out these really subtle touches and flourishes because I think it's Leonardi and Austin, and then of course Glynis Oliver making these incredibly subtle decisions. And I think it really shows a lot of restraint. And I'll give Glynis Oliver props here too because I think she's exhibiting a lot of restraint with the coloring where she's not going nuts with stuff. And obviously, you couldn't really go nuts with things as easily back in the day when you're talking about doing, using color guides and hand coloring and pre-computers. But I mean, these days there would be so many like layers of like gradations and just kind of like crazy stupid effects that would be put on Cloak's cloak. And it's like all these fucking comic book coloring effects these days. Every time I see a cover on the Flash and it's like, ooh, it's like it's blurry behind him because like, whoa, man, he's going fast. So the artwork's all blurred. Like it just looks like dog shit. And it's like it fucks up the line work. And it's so to me, it's just so dumb. It's such bad aesthetic choices and such poorly defined aesthetics. And I think what you see here are actually mature artists who are using discernment and subtlety and restraint to create, like you say, like volume and drama and detail without all these like bells and whistles that people can play with now, willy nilly. I mean, this is just great, beautiful, simple comic coloring. And it's like the stuff they're leaving out just as much as the stuff they're putting in. Like it's just
well,
exactly right.
you're absolutely right. It's like that time. Do you remember I was telling you a couple days ago that my brother Alex was saying like the thing about if you use like the gradients, it
Hmm.
makes it feel softer. It's not
Yes.
never as graphic as if you just use a black line
Yep.
or a solid color,
Yep.
because it just goes pow.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And it's like you're making a choice. You
yeah,
know,
you're
it's like
making
it's like you're making a choice. It's like in writing or in fucking drawing or anything. It's like make a choice. And I think that's kind of what flat color forces. Flat color forces an aesthetic choice, and it's not like, well, it's going to be a little of this, but it's going to kind of fade to that and blah blah blah. And
yeah,
it's
well, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, you know what? I'll go on a side note here. I think you might have sent me this video about why do movies look bad now? They
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
look
yeah,
like
yeah. That was
because
that video that
yeah,
went kind of viral a few weeks ago, and it was like some young cinematographer dude talking about the Parent Trap versus
yeah, yeah.
Wicked, and how
Well,
like
Wicked.
Wicked doesn't look anywhere near as good visually, aesthetically as freaking Parent Trap did what like 15, 20 years ago.
Well, the thing that's interesting about he was making the point of, he was like, they don't, and the guy who DP'd Gladiator, first one and the second one, he was like saying that they don't. There's no intention in the art in the lighting. They kind of leave it so that they can make all these tweaks in post, as opposed to saying I'm making a statement with what I'm doing now,
Yes,
and you're not
exactly.
gonna change it. Because back in the day, a lot of times, like I remember I was reading something a long time ago when I saw Lost Highway. I thought that movie looked so, it had a look to it, I couldn't understand how he was doing it. And I remember reading that the DP, he put a tobacco filter on the lens for the whole movie in that first part when it's Bill Pullman, and I was
Mm,
like, "Oh, that's interesting," because he's baking in something into the image. Like every image is going to have that tobacco filter on it, so all the colors are never going to be clean because
right.
they have that. So it's like, but with something like Wicked, it's like, let's not do that kind of like, hey, we're making a choice and we can't go back,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Because you might want to go in and go, well, we can change it. I mean, you can do a lot of work in post these days digitally, but these guys can't do that. So they're going like, here's our best shot at this.
Yeah,
And
and I
let
think it like forces better decisions.
Yeah,
You have
yeah.
to kind of stand behind the decision you make, and like, I mean, that's kind of how comics were done for like 100 years up
Well, it's
until
comics and movies
yeah, and
because
movies too. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just like, this movie I'm trying to read master from like 20 years ago. I remember the thing that made it difficult was we were shooting on film and we were on a Sunday and we were running out of film and we were like, okay, so now we gotta like be more specific about what we're gonna do with every take. We gotta be really
yeah,
on it because you just can't let the camera just roll like knowing that we just take it to take it to take it to take it to take, because then you don't, there's no sense of like this is precious. Like every moment
right.
is a precious thing. And you know what? Once the film runs out, there's no more
That's it.
there's no more. And
Yeah.
you know what they used to always say back in the day, like you have to kind of like think about a shooting ratio of like 4-1 or 5-1. So it's like, hey, for every minute of finished film, I might shoot 5 minutes of actual film. And if you go, and you get too high, well, then you're fucking up, and the studio could get really mad at you because it's like, what are you doing? Because it's all that was money,
Right.
But now they're just like, people just let the camera stay on now. And I'm just like, whoa, whoa. But it shows no intentionality, which these guys weren't even about. Um,
Yep.
Now, here we go. What's this, page 6? This little shot in the middle that's like when they're like, hey, they're about to disappear, and it's like those. It's
Hmm.
the shot, the way that he's breaking it up like that to show that. I mean, I guess they're disappearing, but I don't know. That's such a great composition. That's like,
Oh man, yeah, yeah. You're talking about the second tier down on page 6, in issue
yeah,
number 3, and it's got Cloak and Dagger basically disappearing after this encounter that they had with these bad guys, and Cloak just kind of puts his cloak around Dagger, and she says, "How do we know they're telling the truth?" And he says, "We know, Dagger, because they know that if they are lying, we will be back." And as Cloak says those last words, it's like a giant rectangular panel that's split into one, two, three, four, five, six, like 6 vertical panels, 6 vertical tiers. And yet, Cloak's cloak is the one thing that goes across almost all of them as it kind of moves us through time while he's talking. And then when he's done, bam, we fade to black, and then boom, the cops show up and Cloak and Dagger have disappeared. Again, this is such incredibly like well thought out storytelling, and it's so elegantly and effortlessly done there. Like it feels effortless, but man, it is so well thought out. Just beautiful transition there. And now we're in the scene with the cop showing up, and this is the cop, the detective O'Reilly, who's like the last honest cop on the force, who we've been having this like C story with, and she shows up right at the moment the Cloak and Dagger disappear. Just an amazing segue.
Amazing. I think what's really cool is the way what's the guy's name? Bruzenak, the letterer.
Oh yeah, Bruzenak, Ken Bruzenak.
Yeah, Bruzenak. What's cool is in this panel, this tier is that when Cloak is talking, each little like dialogue balloon is like it's in the middle. It's in the gut. What is the gutter?
Oh
Not the
yeah,
gutter, but
right.
it's
Yes.
between. It's in the white between the panels, and it's like it's like it's part of that part. Like it's not.
Yes.
It's not in the panel. It's overlay. That's like such a fucking cool technique. God
Oh, it
damn it.
is. You're right, man. Everyone here just like they came to play for real. And like Bruzenak, you can see why he was the favorite letterer of Howard Chaykin. And I mean, just amazing work.
These guys were really doing it. Yeah, so we go to the cops, and next thing you know, like we're back at the Holy Ghost Church, and Dagger and Cloak are there, and I guess they're still having this existential conversation about should they be doing what they're doing. And then we see this shadow in the background, and don't really know what that is yet until the next page where it's Spider-Man. And now we segue into the Spider-Man story.
Yes.
And
And what a page, Chris. What a page. Oh my God. Talk about a DeLuca effect again, where we see the multiple Spideys as he lands on a rooftop, takes off, grabs his backpack or whatever off a rooftop and puts on his clothes by the time he hops down off the fire escape to the street. But in the meantime, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, like 15 versions of Spider-Man as he takes off his spider suit, turns into Peter Parker, and by the bottom of the page, he's in full-on Peter Parker mode, just kind of like folding up his Spidey mask in his hands. I mean, I've never seen a Spider-Man costume change shown in one page like this with such skill and creativity. Like this is a fucking all-time classic Spider-Man page as far as I'm concerned. This is like high level,
this is
unbelievable stuff.
This is insane. Like this is the kind of thing that this feels like it feels like he's trying to one up some of the Frank Miller like Daredevil when he would like
yeah. It's almost like Leonardi's showing off. Like, check out what I can do. It's pretty amazing.
Because every once in a while you would see like Miller do this with Daredevil, but it wasn't. But the contortionist work that Parker was doing here as he's flipping around and like doing somersaults, it's just damn, dude. That's wild. It's so wild.
It really is, man. I mean, like how many of these pages like do we keep seeing where I'm like, oh my God, like how much could that original have sold for? I hope these originals are going for insane amounts on the aftermarket, and the original art market these days, because they deserve to. I hope there's a Rick Leonardi renaissance happening now, if it hasn't already, because this is just like, it's such world-class work. These pages should be selling for a lot of money. And if only that money would find its way back to Leonardi and Austin,
creator,
if we lived in such a world, that would be truly amazing.
Yeah, and so Parker he's coming to it's not an orphanage, it's a place for runaways, right? He's there to take photographs for the reporter. And this is kind of this is a cool little story for it fits the theme of this book about how the streets chew up children because children have been chewed up at home. They've left home. It's all about runaways,
Right.
And that's what's kind of interesting. I this dead horse the whole time. It's like, what's the story about? Wasn't there a show called Runaways?
Oh yeah, there was the one based on the Marvel comic.
Oh, I guess it was based on a Marvel comic, yeah, but,
Yeah, it was Brian K. Vaughan and,
Brian K. Vaughan, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and, Alphonse Alfona, I think was the original artist.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
But there's a really cool page where Parker was looking at this board of all these kids who have run away, who are valedictorians to high school, like, sports stars, and it's a really it's like it's a sad it's a tragic examination of what happens to kids who don't, and this is, I mean, and it was cool is what I like about this is the woman tells them, you can't photograph these kids because we don't want these kids to their location to be known by anyone because we don't know why they've left, but we don't want to expose them to any kind of
right,
potential danger
right.
from their family or or whatever caused them to run. Maybe it's gangs, whatever. I don't really know. It's a very I mean, I don't know. This part kind of made me think a lot about what
Yeah, and yeah, go ahead.
no, just go ahead. That's it, yeah.
Oh, okay, I was just gonna say that I think that moment where the woman is talking about the thing you just said, in terms of we protect the privacy of the runaways, et cetera, that felt very much to me so convincing that I figure Mantlo, he had to have researched this because he clearly had an interest in these real life kind of situations. And of course,
Yeah,
like we said, he went on to become a public defender in New York, and he was studying and passing the bar, not long after writing this. And, he was a real life guy kind of trying to be, and was helping people who were in tough situations. And so I think Mantlo had a real interest in social justice and, protecting dispossessed or vulnerable people in society. And obviously that's amazing and that's phenomenal, and it's really cool to see him kind of bringing some of that to comics. And I think it did feel more realistic than the average comic book portrayal of such a thing. And we should also mention, because we're an 80s comics podcast as well, that the whole idea of tackling runaways and that being an issue, children who were out on the streets and had run away from home for whatever reasons, that was a thing in the 80s that the comic book industry in particular was choosing to shine a light on. Do you remember the New Teen Titans had their special 2-part story, Runaways?
yeah, yeah,
And that
yeah,
was like a
yeah,
whole special thing. And I think they even introduced a character, and there might have been like a side book, like a one-shot special where they had this character called the Protector that they introduced, who was
yeah,
like, he had a blue costume, and he was like specifically, I think, had to do with like helping kids, get off the streets or whatever. I mean, I think that this issue was really kind of front and center in the 80s. You had kids on milk cartons. That was also a big thing in the 80s as well.
yeah. It
We
became a
were,
thing.
you know what I mean?
It
Like we were
became a
growing
thing.
up. Yeah, like you
Yeah,
couldn't buy a carton of milk without seeing a couple of missing kids and reading a tragic story about them. And it's awful, but it was kind of cool that comics were tackling that in the ways that they could, with books like Cloak and Dagger and, New Teen Titans. And then, of course, we've talked before about the show, how on our show, how comics also tackled, the Ethiopian hunger crisis with those benefit books that Marvel and
right.
DC put out. So there was a lot of socially conscious stuff brewing at Marvel and DC, to the credit of both publishers. I think that's a cool thing where comics actually gave a shit and comics creators gave a shit, and they wanted to put comics out there to help make the world a better place. So I think that's awesome, and it's just kind of worth remembering that that's where comics were at in the 80s.
Yeah, I think this is at a time when Marvel was not yet a public company. Like
Mm,
and although DC was owned by Time Warner wasn't the slave of Wall Street that it became once it got the whole thing, the merger with AOL.
mhm.
Because it's like you made a good point about these socially conscious books, and it's like, why don't they do that now? And every once in a while they do. Like they did one a few years ago, DC, called like DC Love, that was sort of like a queer, or like a,
Right, right.
but it was more those sto I like this is very like this next page where they go to you're right about Mantlo knowing this, because this page where it's like, hey, here we are with this encounter group where parents gather to try
Yes.
and understand how they lost their children.
Yeah.
Like, I bet this happens,
Yeah.
but it's like I never even knew something like this would happen.
Right.
You
I
know?
believe Mantlo was there, firsthand, and he was actually either at these groups or he was talking to people who were at these groups, because these pages feel just far too specific to be something that he's just kind of like pulling out of his ass. I think that
Oh yeah.
he was absolutely doing the research, and good for him, for all the, for all the criticism we might have of, some of the storytelling stuff that's not working on the writing side. I think that Mantlo clearly was doing a lot of very cool stuff in the story, and I think the socially conscious angle of Cloak and Dagger that he's going for here is one of the coolest things and one of the more unique things about their book and these characters.
Yeah, because the thing about this is, and just one last thing, because do you remember we were talking about? We didn't talk about this, but it was on Zot, right? When we did the Zot episode, there was that one issue that's in the black and white that's sort of like it's sort of like a queer or like a gay issue that's very
Oh yeah,
well
it's about
known or
the
something like.
yeah. It's about the character of Terry coming out for the first time, and it's a beautiful story, and it's very like sensitively and emotionally told, and it made a huge impact on a lot of people, including myself. When I read it, it was like it
Yeah,
was a
well,
very
yeah,
cool thing that Zot did that.
and that's the thing. I bring it up because it's like I think that's what like comics used to be able to do that. I don't know if they really do that anymore. I don't
Yeah,
know. I mean, I don't read enough modern stuff to know, but it feels like it doesn't fit. It would fit within. I mean, like maybe Image Book would do it, or maybe I don't know, a Mad Cave or something like that. I don't really know, but it doesn't seem like that would be. I think there'd be pushback on that.
Yeah, I
It
think there's just
seems.
there's pushback these days on, so many things that I think a lot of creators feel paralyzed and too nervous to even go into certain, territory. And so they just kind of avoid it altogether. And, I think the result is maybe you are going to get less stories that are kind of pushing the envelope in certain ways. And, back then it felt very original and cool to see comics kind of venturing into areas they'd never gone into before, especially when you could tell the creators genuinely cared.
Yeah.
When you could tell, I mean, it wasn't like, this was like a money grab to have Cloak and Dagger tackling these issues or to have Zot doing that storyline. It wasn't
It's
about like, yeah, it wasn't about let me get some attention for my book and, do something commercial. It was quite the opposite. It was like, let me take a chance and tell a story about something that I don't know how the audience is going to react to. And I think that's cool territory for comics to go into. But it's a little bit off topic, but in a similar vein, one of the first Grant Morrison comics that made a huge impact on me was a book he did that was published over in England, I believe by Trident originally. And it was a one-issue storyline called St. Swithin's Day. It was written by Grant Morrison, illustrated, drawn, I should say, by Paul Grist. And it was a story about kind of a neurotic young man who was kind of an outsider. I think he actually wrote the words neurotic boy outsider on his face at one point in the story. And it was about him attempting to assassinate Margaret Thatcher. And the whole storyline, you're with him. And it's kind of like, it's almost like a Catcher in the Rye type story. And you're seeing these diary entries from this young man who I later found out was actually based on Grant Morrison themselves. And Grant Morrison had pulled from his own journal entries when he was a young person. And you see this guy in the story on a path, on a mission to assassinate Margaret Thatcher, and the whole story is building up to it. And he gets right up to it at the end of the story, and kind of like, spoiler warning, he attempts to assassinate her, and it turns out, not exactly the way you expect, but it's kind of a cool twist at the ending. And then, they tackle this kid, and it's like, a bunch of hubbub and whatever. And then that was it. And it was like this one issue story about a kid trying to assassinate Margaret Thatcher. I think you'd have a lot of trouble publishing a comic today
oh,
about, you know what I
oh,
mean? Like
oh,
you couldn't do that. And
oh.
like, people would freak out. People would lose their minds. And I get it. Okay. These are real people. You don't want to encourage the assassination of real people. I get that, obviously. But, that story at the time was an impactful story. And I think it was taken as, what it was, like a protest story about Margaret Thatcher's regime and her policies, and et cetera. And I don't remember if it came out literally during her tenure as prime minister, or if it was after she was out of the public eye, but it was, it was sometime in the 80s, or maybe early 90s.
Right, right.
But anyways, like, I don't know why that popped into my head, but just, I guess just talking about these stories that are venturing into sort of, controversial territory for comics. Back then I feel like we'd see something like that every other month. We'd see something really kind of provocative, like, holy
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah,
It
you
it
did well,
was it
you
was a
do,
thing.
yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I just yeah, just the corporatizing is like, make it blunt, or
Hmm.
sand it down. Well, not make it blunt, but sand it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
Um,
Sand it down. Because remember, folks, these are products. These
yep,
are products. These are all products coming at you. God
it's
forbid you think of them as expressions of art or
it's
the
g
human spirit or anything like that. These are
it's
just
gotta sell, and it's
gotta
gotta
sell,
sell.
gotta sell, gotta serve the
Um,
corporate IP. That's what we're
yep,
doing, right?
yep.
Yeah, it's so dumb.
So in the book, so then we meet Dagger's father is in this support group, and that's when Parker sees the photo of her and he's like, "Oh my God, that's Tandy." That he finds out her name and
Yeah.
he's like, "That's Dagger." And he's like, "I gotta go do something now,"
Right.
and he like runs off from his assignment and he's like, "I gotta go find Cloak and Dagger." And he's like, he's web swinging around town, a bunch of other fucking cool ass pals with him, and then he knows where they hang out at the Holy Ghost Church, and he shows up and he finds them, and I guess because they appeared in that Spectacular Spider-Man, they know who Spider-Man is, and Cloak is a little bit like, you kind of cause us problems, but they argue and they have this discussion about the runaways, and and this is when Cloak gets a little more personality. Like he's
Oh, yes. Yes.
yeah, like you get more than this like 2 or 3 words quoting the mission kind of thing. Yeah, like he goes into this more, but which I appreciate that he's now, as opposed opposed to that the demon that the Telgato
Oh God.
is talking to him as. um and then there's and then Parker tries, and Dagger tries to explain, I'm not human, I've got no one who can understand me to go back to, and he's like, well, no, I mean, like and we get the quick Spider-Man origin for a second. He's like, like you can do things, you have to only want to have problems, and
Mhm.
he's talking about how he's thinking, he's like, oh, like you wonder what would Spider-Man be like if he didn't have Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Like it's an interesting kind of like dynamic here that he thinks about. You know,
Yes.
um, but but then him being like again, how old is he here? Because then he starts trying to like talk to her about like, don't you want to go
Oh,
back and be
oh
like,
yeah, yeah. This is the lovey-dovey moment with Dagger and Spidey. I also just want to comment on Cloak when he finally does start talking more here. Like you say, Cloak has like a very funny and interesting way of talking too, very formal sometimes. When he says to Spider-Man, "Spider-Man, you keep interfering in our affairs, and yet you know nothing of Dagger's pain." And he says, last week she sought a rapprochement with her mother. And I think this is hilarious that Cloak is like using like the French word for reestablishing kind of
yeah,
relations with
yeah,
someone. She sought a rapprochement with her mother. It was a most unpleasant or it was most unpleasant. While her relationship with her stepfather may be different, I cannot allow Dagger. And then Dagger's like, allow me to do what, Cloak? So it's true. Cloak's finally kind of having more of a specific voice, but it is also a very stilted, formal voice in a lot of ways. It's like, it's
yeah.
interesting how Mantlo chooses to write Cloak. But yeah, Dagger comes in then, and as you were saying, she
What happened?
and Spidey have a little bit of. Oh, good, good, okay.
Okay, all right. So we're
Okay,
back
cool.
recording now.
Okay,
Okay.
cool, cool, cool. Hey, hey, Chris. So on page 14 is, I think, one of the craziest moments in the whole damn run that we read here. Would you like to describe the craziness that happens between Spidey and Dagger on this wild page 14?
So Spider-Man is clearly smitten by her, and he starts to say, "Don't you want a life of like a teenager?" And then he grabs her hand like they're at some waltz, and they're like, and they're waltzing around because you see the way like her legs are, his. I mean, and they're just talking, and he's like, he's like, attending the prom in the arms of some boy, feeling his heart's beat against yours, like holding him tight while you dance through the night. Like he's got some weird, like, some trying to rhyme, and then and he's like waiting, and then she takes off his mask,
Yes. And he lets her.
and he lets her, and they just like look at each other's face for a moment, and then they both kiss.
And it's like it's a real kiss, and they're
Yeah,
like they're staring at each other for like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 silent panels, like
yeah,
6 silent panels of like romance and like just clearly passion between Spidey and Dagger, who once again we must remind you is 16 years
scene.
old at this time, and Spidey's just like spitting game, dancing with her, and then like romancing her, and she pulls off his mask, and it's like fucking Peter Parker just right there, no mask, and he's making out with her.
Yeah,
and
it's
then and
wild. It's
then
wild. It's
finally
wild.
somebody comes to their senses, on the next page, and Cloak screams what we're all thinking, which is no.
Yeah,
Stop deluding her, Spider-Man. Stop taunting Dagger with that which she cannot have. And Dagger's all like pissed. She's like, "What, Cloak? A normal life, a chance at happiness?" And he says, "It's not that simple." And she says, "Because you don't want it to be." Oh no, I'm sorry, that's Spidey talking. "Because you don't want it to be, because you don't want to lose her." Well, damn, Spidey. It seems like you don't want to lose her either. I
either.
mean,
Yeah, I
what's
mean,
going on here?
again, it's like, no, I don't know how old he is. I mean, it's like this is maybe college age Spider, but
Yeah,
he's still too old.
yeah,
He's still 4 to 6, maybe even 10 years older than her.
it's crazy.
Maybe, but and then he's like, I'm gonna show you something.
Right.
Cloak, and Cloak like envelops Spider-Man and Dagger in his cloak so they can teleport, which is kind of interesting use of his power because you don't know that he could teleport someone to put you in the cloak without, like making you see the worst, like your worst fears, right? Or all this kind of
Right.
stuff that we know. They're just doing this. So it's a nuance in his power. What's kind of cool is they go again, like here's these like surreal pages where they
Yeah.
go and they're
Very
seeing,
surreal. Like
yeah, and
really
there's
crazy, crazy panels.
yeah, and they're traveling through Manhattan to get to, I guess, I don't know where they're going, but they're at the moment, but I can't remember. But Cloak is showing Spider-Man how he sees the world. He sees the darkness. He sees their auras, and she sees their auras of light, and it's kind of interesting, it's
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of,
yeah. They're looking at all the denizens of New York, and Dagger says, "Cloak is showing us the night and the darkness that reigns on the streets." And Peter Parker says, "Is that why everything appears abstracted, more like light impressions than physical reality?" And she says, "As we travel inside Cloak, we see the world as he sees it, as auras of light. Predatory forces of darkness are always trying to consume the light cast by the living. There are children lost in this night dark world, Spider-Man, homeless, hungry, afraid, alone, praying and preyed upon, even as Cloak and I once were." And then you see like a really creepy panel of like what looks like 3 silhouettes of like maybe like 3 dudes somewhere up to no good. And like, what is that, like a person on the ground, like in
yeah,
between them?
it's probably someone who's like beat up, or maybe,
Like,
I mean,
yeah, it's
there's
kind of
someone in the
hard to tell. It's kind of a creepy final panel in silhouette. I was trying to make out like, is it a person crumpled up between these 3 people? Like we're about to like do something terrible to them. It's hard to tell, but it's a creepy ass silhouette that they end the page with.
yeah, well, also because there's someone in the back corner there might be someone shooting up,
Yeah,
so it's
yeah,
like,
yeah, totally. I should say a creepy sort of like group of silhouettes where you're not
yeah,
quite sure what they're
not
doing, but they're up to no good.
I mean, it could be the person that could be someone on the floor who's dying
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they're,
looks like it.
they're overdosed, I
Right,
mean,
right. That
it
makes sense.
it's crazy. I mean, I don't know, but it's a good way to kinda, like, I mean, and then they come back and Spider-Man is like, "I've never felt the city like this."
Mm.
Shocked, then
Yeah.
he puts his mask on and all and then he's like, "Well, I think we'll be going now. Peace." You know? He disappears the minute that he goes, those drugs will be sold to children, and we're going to save our flock. And they disappear. They go to the West
Yeah.
Side Pier, and right when they disappear is when Father Delgado comes in with the stepdad.
Right, right, and then
And
Spidey jumps up on the wall himself, and now Spidey hides. Cloak and Dagger have disappeared. Spidey jumps up on the wall, and the stepdad is like, "Was that Tandy? Is that what my daughter's become? My God, how can I ever hope to bring her home now?" And it's kind of convenient that he's like showing up right at that exact second. But all right, we're keeping our storylines in motion, all of them.
keeping our pace, keeping our pace. I mean, it's kind of cool. And then Spider Man is like, you know what? I got to get to the next page is him swinging around town. He's like, I got to get to the pier,
Yeah.
but but he's like, I don't know where because they didn't really tell me. And these are some really good like shots of the city he's
Yeah,
drawn.
and some good Spidey poses too. But you're right. The
Yeah,
city looks incredible, and it looks like Leonardi's kind of like getting more and more comfortable drawing Spider-Man on some of these panels and these pages here. Like he's having fun with him.
yeah, it's great. It's great. And and then we're back at the police station with what's her name again?
Oh
O'Reilly.
yeah, Detective O'Reilly, our somewhat boring subplot we keep going back to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, this is and then he's like, she's like, the priest wants to like, this is the dad. Can you take him? Blah blah blah. And then she's like, I can't take a civilian around. Are you out of your mind? Too much danger. You know.
The most interesting thing about this page to me is like O'Reilly's pants. Like
Yeah.
those are some very stylish looking pants for like a police detective to be wearing, as everyone else has got all these guns and they're about to go, and she's got like on like it's like guns herself, maybe a
And, they're
bulletproof
ple-
vest.
and her pants are pleated, which is
Yeah,
kind
they're
of interesting.
they're pleated
Um,
with like a pattern on them, and they look like
yeah,
incredibly stylish.
it's some sort of zipatone pattern or something like
Yeah.
that, I guess. It's kind of cool. It's
Yeah, I
kind of
like them.
cool.
I like
It's
it.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
Kind of cool. And that face looks like her close up looks like a Frank Miller face. It really looks like a Frank
Yeah,
Miller.
yeah, you're right, you're right. She does look like a Frank Miller
Really,
face.
literally
It's
look like a Frank
interesting.
Miller face. And then where Spider-Man, he shows up at the boat, or he shows up at the dockyard, and he's like, "Oh, this is the tug. This is where, like this is where." So he kind of like disrupts this. This is weird because Spider-Man gets to the boat and disrupts this tugboat before Cloak and Dagger get there, and they teleported there. So
Mm.
kind of
Oh,
weird
yeah.
that.
Oh, that is weird. I didn't think about that. That's actually very, very strange.
But the thugs, they pull out the bullets, try to shoot Spider-Man. It's kind of a cool shot of Spider-Man like dodging the bullets and the way they shoots up the engine, and then
Yep.
it's gonna blow up, and then here's Cloak and Dagger showing up, and there's this big fight, which is again like it's done masterfully with the way he's now incorporating Spider-Man like into their fighting style. Um, it's pretty cool. And then this one guy's like, I'm gonna shoot them all. And he's like, let's get out of here. And they take off. Now this panel is one of my favorite panels in the book. In the
Mm.
page 21, that middle panel where the boat is disappearing, and they're shooting at Cloak and Dagger and
Oh,
Spider-Man.
yeah. Oh, that's a
It's
great panel. You're right.
so fantastic because like that boat is like it's done with a minimalist style,
Yeah.
and it's colored in a way because it's like it's cool because it's like, hey, we're disappearing into the night.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a really smart use of color. I don't know. It's really done really really
No,
well.
no, it really is, man. But it's like just again so masterfully done because there's such minimal line work, such simple drawing, seemingly on the figures here. Like no extra lines, but man, you can just feel the motion. Like it's such
Yeah.
a kinetic panel. It looks like super exciting. You can feel all the craziness happening.
And then it's like it's Dagger. She throws her boat. I mean, like her knives at the guy, and he gets hit, and
She
he
throws
shoots
her she throws her snow cones of
it.
light.
There's snow cones of light. She hits the guy. He shoots up his engine, and then the boat blows up.
Hmm.
And they're like, "Oops, we sort of made a mistake." and then and they have some little conversation, but the police are showing up, and they're like, "Well, maybe we, don't know." It's just more of the subplot and
Yeah.
the drug stuff, and then but it's a cool panel again. That last panel before the cops show up, and then they disappear. They're like, "Poof, we're gone." It was kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because like Detective O'Reilly yells, I mean, seemingly ostensibly at Spider-Man, she yells, "You there in the costume, hold it!" And Spidey swings off and says, "Sorry, no parler anglais." And he swings away. And like, are we suggesting that she's a cop who doesn't know who Spider-Man is in New York City? Like, she's like, "You in the costume." Like, how does she not know who Spider-Man is? And then
Well,
after he swings off, she's like, "Ah, these so-called superheroes. They're vigilantes all," which
well,
is kind of
okay.
funny.
It's funny, and I'm just gonna say this one thing, and here's how I could justify that because I thought that was weird too. And
Yeah.
I can only justify it is it's not colored this way, but it's at night on the docks and there's no light.
Oh,
She
so
could
she
just
just sees a guy from behind
she
in a costume.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. I mean, that's probably the best we can do to shoot them some bail for this moment because that's a
Yeah,
weird moment otherwise.
it's a very weird moment, and
Yeah.
then the dad and the priest show up in a taxi, and they're too late they're a day late and a dollar short, and that's the end of issue 3, pretty
Yeah.
much,
Very exciting. Very exciting issue.
So now let's jump to our next issue, which is
Yes. Our
issue
final
4,
final
final
issue.
issue.
Yes.
Um, and this issue 4 was a little, I'm not gonna say I hated it, but it's interesting, but it's a Secret Wars 2 tie-in.
It is. It is. And I think I might have liked it more than you because I thought it was like a pretty neat summation of the Cloak and Dagger dilemma. Although, to be fair, we're kind of getting that almost every issue. There's a lot of repetition going on with a lot of the stuff they're struggling with. But I thought it was kind of cool to see it kind of put into stark relief with the Beyonder suddenly showing up and them having to kind of justify their positions and in a way kind of like move off of their own kind of stances a little bit when faced with the Beyonder going even further. I
Yeah.
thought Cloak in particular. I thought it was an interesting character moment at the end of the issue that we'll get to with Cloak. So I might have liked this issue more than you, Chris. But I will say, man, another killer splash page. Like that opening page, page 1.
I
Like what
know,
an
dude. So
iconic. I mean, right? Like what the fuck, man?
so good.
Leonardi,
So
just
good.
man, him and
So good.
Austin. God, every splash page is just like fucking A, man. That is so, so good. What incredible acting. It's Dagger just sitting in an easy chair. It's not even like it's a dramatic moment. It's literally they're at the church where they hide out and they fight with the priest every issue, and Dagger's just in like some like purple looking easy chair looking kind of thoughtfully tortured and upset, and Cloak is looming over her looking pissed off. But man, does that look dramatic. Like somehow it's still a hell of a splash. Super, super well drawn.
Well, it's great. It's the thing we read in that article about they were saying that Terry Austin kind of gave him that freedom to know that a thin line can work,
Yes,
and
yeah, yeah, that's right.
you see how he's able to. I think this is what makes his hair so fascinating, especially when he does women's hair.
Yeah.
Particularly like Dagger's hair looks really, really good. Like I was telling like Ken Stacy does hair sort of like this too, where it
Mhm.
feels like it's volumetric as opposed to like actual like line work.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but
And you know who else that we've talked about on the show before who does similarly amazing hair? Not exactly the same, but similarly highly stylized is Larry Stroman.
yeah,
When we
yeah,
looked
yeah,
at
yeah.
Larry Stroman on Alien
Alien
Legion,
Legion, yeah,
and then later on X Factor, Stroman, I think, was very famous for his hair as well.
yeah.
And I agree, though, Chris. I'm glad you pointed out Leonardi's hair for Dagger because it is something that I keep noticing, too, that looks just so fucking cool all the time. He just does a great job drawing her hair, which can be very difficult to draw for a lot of artists. But,
Well,
but
yeah,
yeah,
because
they're killing it.
most of the time people just kind of draw like the silhouette of it and just leave it. Like they don't put all these curls and folds and and the draping of it and everything. It's all pretty fucking cool. The colors changes in this issue to Petra.
Oh, Petra
Uh,
Scotese. I didn't
is
notice
Petra
that.
Scotese, yeah.
Oh,
It,
interesting.
it doesn't feel as it's a lot of the same design, but it doesn't feel as juicy. I feel,
Yeah,
you
you're
know?
right. Now that I'm looking at it with that in mind, like he or she, I don't know Petra Scotese, so forgive me. I don't know if that's a man or a woman, but the choices look like maybe patterned after what Glynis Oliver had been doing. You know, like we see kind of a lot of the same stuff with like on pages 4 and 5. You see like the figures being kind of drawn like purple if they're in the background as opposed to the foreground, like kind of a wash of colors, but it does look like it's not being executed with the same gusto or like sort of like artistry as the
Yeah,
way Glynis was doing it.
yeah, the choices of it would be like a little, yeah, like I'm
Yeah,
not sure what it is, but it's, but so,
it's okay. It looks okay.
it's
It doesn't look
okay.
bad. It
I'm
just
not thinking,
it's
not thinking it's just I just noticed it was different. I couldn't figure out
yeah,
why
you're
at
right.
first. But but the priest has thing to say, Cloak and Dagger, like, yeah, dude, later for you. Like they're just not it's a weird, they hammer this part a lot. I don't get it. And then we're back to this subplot with the thing is still with the drugs from last issue, and they're like, with O'Reilly. And and then this part was kind of strange. It's like she beats that guy, she pistol whips that guy.
Yeah. I know. Like that's fucking weird. Isn't she supposed to be the good cop? I
Supposed to
thought
be
she
the
was.
good cop.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
thought that
she
was
like,
her whole thing. Like her whole character shtick is like,
I'm gonna
I'm the
be good.
last.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not gonna break the law. And then she pistol whips this guy, and then she had a gun up to his face, like,
yeah,
motherfucker, I might shoot you if you don't
right.
answer my questions.
Yeah. Like it's pretty wild, man. I guess she's losing it. Detective O'Reilly.
Yeah,
Maybe Mantlo was getting pressure from editorial that the storyline was getting really boring and like we needed to like spice it up.
we spice it up. And then here we are on page 8. I guess it's page 8, The Beyonder. Is that what that is? Page 8? Is that page 10?
Yeah. I think it's actually Beyonder
Page
shows
10?
up on page no, it's actually page 6.
Oh, page 6, page 6. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Now, now look, I'm not saying I didn't like this issue. It's just that I don't like the fact that The Beyonder is in
Yeah,
this.
I mean, okay, the
And
Beyonder's goofy. The Beyonder's obviously very goofy. That's a given. I mean,
it's just
oh,
that,
Chris, should you explain who the Beyonder is for people listening to our show who've never read Secret Wars 1 or 2? I'm sure there's quite a few people
there
who
are
are
people,
like, yeah, who is that?
so in Secret Wars, the original Secret Wars, which is not what it became later on with, I don't know what it becomes under Bendis's thing, whatever it is. Maybe it's not Bendis, maybe it's the other guy, Hickman. But Secret Wars was a thing where the Mole Man had used, not the Mole Man, the Molecule Man used his weapon to powers to break a hole in a different dimension. And there was a god there, and all that was there was beyond her. There was nothing else but him. And this little pinprick gave him like a look into I guess where Earth 616 is what it is. And this character in the Beyonder, he decided to bring some of the heroes to this world in the first Secret Wars to battle among the battle. Not amongst themselves, but I can't remember what it is now, but like to face off against him.
Yeah.
And
To face off against each other, though, like the heroes and the villains. So you had a
yeah,
whole bunch of heroes and a bunch of villains, and then the Beyonder was doing like a cosmic game show almost.
yeah.
He was just like, "Hey, Earth's heroes and Earth's villains, superheroes, supervillains. I'd like to see you guys battle." It was kind of like the Beyonder was like, "Let's do Survivor on another planet," and see who wins. And I had completely forgotten the Molecule Man was part of the genesis of the original Secret Wars. Is that true?
Yeah. If there was, because he's like is he like a Fantastic Four villain or maybe an
I think
Avengers villain?
he might have been. I forget if he was. Yeah, one of those. One of
He's-
those.
What
Yeah.
he might have been. I don't think he was Spider Man, but But anyway, he had like a rod. I think a cosmic. Not that's someone else. But there's a panel in one of these issues, or some book where it's like you see him use it, and it's like a white panel with a black little like a hole in it, and that's like the panel that shows that's how his power like reached across the whatever and broke a hole in the multiverse, this whatever it is, and a pinprick, and that's
Mm.
how the Beyonder was like, oh, something came into my understanding of what the universe was,
Oh, that's so
and he was
crazy.
like,
I totally forgot about that.
yeah, and he was like, "What is this?" I'm looking, and he started watching and watching, and then he eventually did the thing. It's funny because there was a series that came out a few years earlier, it's called Contest of Champions.
Oh
That
yes,
was like
yeah, right.
a 3-issue miniseries that predated Secret Wars, and like I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and I didn't read it until after Secret Wars came out. And I was kind of like, oh, Secret Wars is just like a it's like a it's like a reboot of that to in a certain
Right.
way, not really, but it is. Felt like they were already trying to like retread stuff. So the Beyonder, he created all this stuff. At the end of the first miniseries, he lets all the humans go, and on his world is where Peter Parker, his suit, the main suit we all know, gets ruined, and he finds he finds the creature that
the symbiote.
yeah,
Yeah.
symbiote that becomes the that he puts on to save him. And at the
Right.
time,
The
I mean,
black costume.
it's even dangerous at the time. It's in like some weird little like glass container, and he like reacts to him, and he like breaks it out and like puts it on because he's afraid to show everybody that he's Peter Parker.
Mm.
Like within the context of all the heroes.
Yeah. So,
And then
anyways, well, that was Secret Wars, right?
yeah, Secret Wars.
That's where
Yeah,
the Beyonder comes from, and then
the Beyonder.
Secret Wars 2 was him coming to Earth,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Because he basically it's like the story of like I don't know. It's one of those stories of like the god wants to come and experience humanity kind of
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly. He's a god. He's a god, and he's a particularly 80s looking god because he looks
Yeah,
like he's kind of wandered out of like a, like a Lionel Richie or a
or
Michael Jackson
Or
or
Duran
Duran, yeah,
Duran, like the Duran
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 video.
video,
Yeah, yeah,
something
totally.
like that.
Very, very 80s looking god, from his outfit to his hair. And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's just like, let me learn about humanity. And so he's wandering through the streets. Just to briefly summarize this kind of one and done story, he comes across these like, drug dealers on a stoop. They're like, hey dude, you want to get happy, you want to feel stoked on life? And he's like, why, yes, human, I would like to be happy. And he doesn't realize they're drug dealers. He doesn't know what all that is. So they lead him into their house of ill repute or what have you, where they got people here, like, it's kind of a heroin den, smack
yeah,
house kind of
yeah,
situation. And they basically inject the Beyonder with some heroin. And he's like, yes, please make me happy. And he's kind of goofy, kind of funny dialogue. He's completely misunderstanding, you want to get high. And he's like, yes, humans, please help me. I want to feel what you're feeling. And so they're injecting him with heroin. And suddenly Cloak and Dagger, they realize, they see the Beyonder walking into this place. They see what's happening. And they break in to save him. And in that moment, they take out the drug dealers. And the Beyonder is pissed because he's like, why did you do that? These people wanted to make me happy, and you are trying to go against them. So those who offer others happiness are good. And so suddenly he like fucks up Cloak and Dagger with his god powers, and he says, those who deny others happiness are evil. According to your own morality, you must be punished. And then Cloak and Dagger are like, no, 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 you don't understand. And he's like, I'm going to take away your powers. You don't deserve these powers. You're terrible. And see, he takes away their powers. They revert back to being Tyrone and Tandy, and they're all happy. They're like, oh my God, you freed us of this curse. Thank you, weird alien dude. You freed us from our curse. And he's like, what the hell? You're happy to not have powers? And then they explain to him, yeah, those powers are a curse for us. And those guys were lying to you. Their version of happiness is like this horrible drug. It's smack, it's heroin. They were going to overdose you so they could rob you. And Beyonder's like, what are drugs? I want to feel this. Let me feel what it would have felt like. And then there's a crazy page on page, what is it, page 16, where the Beyonder basically allows himself to feel what that heroin injection would have felt like when they tried to overdose him. And
yeah,
it's like this crazy page of like, horrific collage of the Beyonder in agony. And it's like a horrible looking page. He's clearly just super fucked up. And also, there's a pretty fucked up decision that was made in terms of the coloring of the lettering on this page, because we talked about this, Chris. It's like pretty much unreadable because it's been printed in red ink over a very dark background, and it just looks really muddy, and you literally can't really read any of the lettering, with the exception of maybe at the very end the letters get bigger and it's something about a world without end. But clearly the idea is Beyonder's being tortured, and he can't believe people do this for fun. He comes out of this situation and he's like, oh my God, you were right. These drug dealers, they weren't trying to make me happy. They're monsters. Oh my God, this is what a terrible problem. Now I see why you're fighting against them. This is a real problem on your planet. Let me just kill all the drug dealers. And then he just goes
yeah,
zap. Yeah, he goes zap with his with his god powers, and he just fucking dematerializes every drug dealer in New York, turns them all to ashes. And then this was the really interesting character twist that I was talking about with Cloak, where Cloak suddenly, who's been like Mr. Hardline, rah, 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 we got to get these bad guys. Cloak suddenly is like, no, I cannot fathom, he's letting us see how he solves the drug problem by destroying all those in the immediate vicinity involved with this. And Cloak looks kind of pained by this. And Dagger says, he's not giving them any chance to redeem themselves, to reform. He's like a god gone mad. Oh, Cloak, is he right? Is that what we'd be like if we possessed absolute power? And Cloak is listening to Beyonder ranting, and Cloak says, no, it's not right. It's not right. Some of those slain might not have been evil. Perhaps they were merely helpless addicts themselves, or perhaps they dealt drugs because their environment taught them no other way to make a living. Dagger was right. There are degrees of good and evil, shades of right and wrong. Did you make that distinction before you punished? And so it's pretty interesting that Cloak now is arguing on behalf of forgiveness for these drug
Yes.
dealers, so that's what I kind of really appreciated about this issue. Is it's like,
Sure.
it is kind of a big character turn for Cloak. I thought that was kind of cool to see that.
Well, look, that's true. I think that I think when he's faced with what he does, as opposed to, which is like, it's sort of clear that Cloak and Dagger don't kill the people.
Right.
Some people do die, but but with Cloak, it's always like, I'm going to put you in my cloak. And I'm going to show you this about yourself.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you can't survive your own truth, that's what kills you, not me.
Right.
Which is
Yes, that's
interesting,
true.
as opposed to what the Beyonder is doing is, I'm just gonna wipe everyone out,
I'm just gonna execute. I'm gonna execute everyone involved with the drug trade.
everyone
There,
involved,
problem solved.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool because Cloak then convinces the Beyonder to bring everybody back.
Yes.
To,
Yes.
hey, like, can you release that? And can I mean, it's, and he does, and like, he says that, and then Dagger gets in there. She's got
Yeah.
things to say to really convince him, and he's like, okay, maybe you're right.
She's
I'll
begging. I
bring,
mean, she's actually begging him. She literally gets on her
yeah,
knees,
gets on her
and
knees, yeah,
she's begging before him, and she says some of them were just people who'd gone the wrong way. They should be saved, not slaughtered. That's what Cloak and I should be doing with our powers, offering the wicked a second chance. And then Beyonder says, and yet aren't there some so evil that they are deserving of punishment? And Cloak says, yes, but in a way, like, Cloak and Dagger now are being forced to sort of crystallize their own mission of what they should be doing. And the Beyonder, in his extremity and his extreme overreaction, is kind of forcing a little bit of a course correction for Cloak and Dagger. They're having to
yeah,
like really define themselves, and
yeah,
it's kind of like it's kind of an interesting writing gambit too, because I've heard about people, writing TV shows too, and how that's like it's kind of a trope. Or I think when you and I went to that one writing workshop at Disney, with the woman, what was her name, DMA, and
DMA,
yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah,
she was talking about how, a lot of sitcoms, they'll have the trope of like, clone characters, like the clones that are like the more extreme version of your main character's central ideology, and then the less extreme version of your main character's central ideology. So it's like they become foils for your main character to kind of define themselves in opposition to like which way they could go, like the more extreme version of me, for good or for bad. And I think that's kind of the function that Beyonder serves here. It's like showing Cloak almost like a ghost of Christmas future. Like, Cloak, if you continue down this path, what are you
here's
going to
what's gonna
do?
happen to you.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You know what I mean? Like, in success, what's the plan, Cloak? You going to kill everybody? You're going to kill all the drug dealers? Then what? How are you going to feel? And Cloak is like, no, 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 ghost of Christmas, Beyonder future. I don't want that. Let's find a different
I want to
path.
bring I'm gonna. I feel like it's that they want to bring redemption to these people, or they at
Yes.
least show these people. Excuse me, show these people the error of their ways. It's like, this is a great part about the book, this episode in particular, because, like you said, the thing that was interesting is that when they turn back to who they were, and you like without the powers, and you see Cloak is not he's Tyrone, like he has that stutter, he can't even really speak, but
Yeah.
but he's able to kind of communicate like the emotion of like what they're doing and why they need to be able to do what they're doing. But he's not able to like articulate it enough for the Beyonder not to go to the extreme,
Right.
which is kind of interesting. It's not till he gets the powers back and then he's able to say this. I mean, I mean, you're right. It's a total gamble because there's also that trope. It's like this thing where it's like uh, it's very hard for you as a as a character, as the writer, to have this kind of like this no subtext kind of like statement.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
It's like,
100%,
hey, like I gotta
100%.
do this. It's funny because I just saw this thing online, and I was someone was talking about this. They were talking about like how good of an actor Sean Connery is. There's a moment where they were showing a clip from this movie called Outland, where he gives one of these a confessional thing with no subtext.
Yeah.
It's like a hey, this is what I'm thinking, and I want to do this, and I'm trying to do this, I'm not trying to do this, and I feel bad about myself. And it's this whole thing about he's kind of crystallizing all his shit. And what's genius about it is you have to be so good of an actor to make that scene work.
Oh, yeah.
Because the guy was like, if you're this good, you can make this work. But if you're not this good, it seems like the writing is bad.
Oh,
You
100%, 'cause
know?
the writing probably is bad, and, like, the potential for cringe is
Yeah,
so
it's so
high.
high. It's
So
so
high.
high.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah.
good, it's a cool shot. It's a cool scene because it's just on him and it's sort of far away. And the whole time when he's talking, it's a slow push in. And it's like a minute, 30-second clip. It's on Twitter somewhere, and I was like, yeah, man. I mean, that's one of my favorite little like B movies, Outland. But
Mm.
it's like that moment is like, yeah, he's got to talk to somebody because
Yeah.
it's the thing about they always say this in television show, the movies too, maybe not too much in the movie, but TV it's like you got to get someone they need a partner to talk to. It's almost
Yeah.
rare to have someone walk around silently not
Oh,
talk to
yeah. No,
someone,
totally. Yeah, you need
but
someone else, a sounding board.
yeah, sounding board. But in this comic, it's like the Beyonder is like like you said, he's a weird extreme because he's like has ultimate power, but he's got no experience with anything,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I mean that's the thing that's interesting about him as a character, but I was sort of like they shoehorned him into stuff in a way that I was like, man,
Yeah, no,
this
they
guy,
definitely did. Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
It's these all these Secret Wars crossovers, especially Secret Wars 2, and then of course the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossovers over at DC. A lot of them were pretty whack. But I will say that this is probably one of the better uses of Beyonder that I've seen in one of these like little
yeah,
one-off
it's true.
crossovers. You know what I mean? Because you're actually getting real character work and character evolution on the main characters that I assume is going to be lasting. And I will say, kind of in a similar vein to what Sean Connery did there, and like you were talking about, a good actor can kind of like save some like overly contrived expository, monologue or whatever exposition heavy dialogue. I think it's similar to what we were saying earlier about how Leonardi and Austin have also taken a lot of this super exposition heavy, rather didactic writing at times from Mantlo. And because of the shockingly sophisticated storytelling and character acting and figure work and panel design and rendering, I mean, just they're pulling out all the stops. I think they managed to save the artistry and the artistic merit of this book the way that the average art team just could not. Like the
No,
average art team would be drowned by just page after page of some of the preachier and more didactic bits of dialogue. It would be too much. And I think that you've got these world-class artists, Leonardi and Austin, kind of pulling a Sean Connery in the sense of what you're talking about. They're taking words and dialogue that, by all reasons should not work that well. And they're still crafting just magnificent magnificent pages that look
Yeah.
so beautiful to the eye that you almost forget that you're hearing Cloak and Dagger say almost the exact same thing for the fourth issue in a row, And so, like, it's pretty amazing. Like, I really got to say, as we wind this down here, I just could not be more impressed with Leonardi and Austin and just what they've pulled off here. And then even at the very end, they're not slacking on issue 4 when Beyonder decides to save all the drug dealers and like give them back their lives. There is a mostly silent page where it just says a gesture. And it's such a casual gesture. It's so interesting. It's like a very casual gesture of his hand. And then we see all these silent panels, 6 silent panels flashing around New York of like these characters coming back to life. And in the first panel, it's kind of like a weird white lightning bolty thing. And then what you imagine, actually, you can kind of see the piles of ash on the street there. Those piles of ash once again become living, breathing drug dealers, we imagine. And then we cut to a very sad panel of a woman who looks like a drug addict, in a messed up looking place, looking out a window. And then like you see more kind of like, of the quote unquote dregs of society in more silent panels getting their lives back. But it's such mature storytelling. It's just a gesture and then bam, 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 6 silent panels. And then at the end, it's like, you brought the dead back to life. And Beyonder says, I restored to existence those whose existences I had negated. Dagger says, did you change them? And Beyonder says, nah, I left them as I found them. I now leave the question of whether to punish those who dwell in darkness or to turn them to the light, to Cloak and Dagger. And with that, he disappears. And we're on the last page now. And it's kind of a dope ending. It's like, he's gone, says Cloak. And Dagger says, and all the problems of the world remain. And Cloak says, for we who possess powers that make us something other than human to solve as humanely as possible. Which is like a hell of a character arc for Cloak, because he was all, fucking fire and brimstone, no mercy at the beginning. Now he's like, no, we got to solve these problems humanely. And Dagger's now wondering, did we choose wrongly? I mean, the problem of drugs, perhaps every problem afflicting mankind, could have been solved with a snap of that Beyonder's fingers. Maybe we should have let him take care of us. And like, she's actually questioning, like maybe we should have just taken that, extreme activity to just wipe out all the drug dealers. And Cloak has to say, as if we were children, no, were we to choose that course, Dagger, then we'd remain in a state of perpetual childhood, never growing, never learning from experience, never striving and struggling towards some awareness of our role in the scheme of things, never achieving any control over our own existences. And then Dagger says, I walked out on one set of parents, Cloak. I don't think I want to substitute some cosmic babysitter for my mom and dad. So I guess we got to climb out of the cradle and work at making the world a better place if we want to have the right to inherit the earth. And, parts of it may be kind of creepy to visit, but I think I'd like to live here. And with that, they're staring out the window at New York, and Cloak and Dagger have defined their mission once and for all, what they want to do. And Bill Mantlo leaves us with a final caption: the night is long, but not yet over. There are still deep hours of darkness before the dawn. And, it's a pretty poetic ending to issue 4. I got to say, that's a pretty great ending. After all the chaos of what we read, I like that final moment.
I like it too. It's like, it's an interesting thing with the Beyonder. It's like the thing that I like, part of why I was rankling over this is I was kind of like, Mantlo, like, he needed the Beyonder character to do something that he wasn't able to do.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's true. That's true. And that's fair. Yeah.
And that's the part that kind of, but then, I mean, like, the character is supposed to do that. I think I haven't read any of these in so long, but like, his presence when he would show up in Earth Like Two Girls 2, he would kind of like give everybody some sort of like philosophical thing for thought. I think it works best in this series because there's such existential kind of thing going on with the characters, because I can't think of any other book where they're constantly like questioning, should we even be doing this?
Yeah. Oh, totally. You're right. It's so heavy. It's constant existential dilemma for Cloak and Dagger. So yeah, it's perfect for Beyonder to pop in and force this kind of a decision from them. So yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, that, it did take literally a deus ex machina, kind of a god
Yeah, yeah,
appearing to
yeah,
like kind
yeah.
of force this kind of summation of the mission of our heroes, and a clear defining of what they're doing. But, on the other hand, it's a good use of the Beyonder, and that was rare. And
Very rare, very, very
yeah,
rare.
so I enjoyed this, and I got to say, overall, I ended up enjoying these issues a lot more than I expected. Yes, they're overwritten. Yes, Bill Mantlo's writing style is of the purple prose hyper exposition style of the Doug Menches and the Don McGregors back in the day. It's a different style of writing, but if you get past that and you kind of just give into it and go with it, I mean, it's what comics were for the most part back then. And if you just kind of go with it, man, it's still a wild ride. And wow, does the art make it worth it? Like we keep saying over and over here, this is one of the best looking mainstream comics of the 1980s, full stop. And man, I think Rick Leonardi and Terry Austin deserve all the credit in the world. And so does Glynis Oliver, and so does Ken Bruzenak, because all the aesthetic decisions here in this comic are just top notch. This is a spectacular looking book, Chris, and I'm so glad we covered it.
I just want to go back to the one page where he takes the heroin,
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah.
I think that page is one of the coolest pages of in terms of like it's but yes, the problem with the red lettering.
Right.
But just what the way he's able like, what he does with his visual storytelling, he's got these 6 heads of the Beyonder as he's, like, absorbing the heroin and what that means, and obviously, he's been given so much of it that he's gonna OD, but it's more than that. He then begins to, like, he absorbs some of the negative energy of, like, of what is around the drug game. Like you see that, like, in those panels, the cops, the guy chasing, like him falling down in that little this almost like a Bill Sienkiewicz type of panel where it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
the shatter around.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, okay, I'm like, "Did Sienkiewicz look at this before he
Yeah.
started doing some of the other stuff that he did with, like, the New Mutants and stuff?" Because it's a very I thought this page and the last page you mentioned with the gesture thing are really great examples of just his sheer storytelling without any kind of there's like that he needs no language to convey what he wants to say. I think it's
Absolutely.
interesting
Absolutely.
interesting too about that panel where he's like the gesture is the Beyonder is like he's like gesturing like I ain't got time for this. Like it's like a side view of like he's almost like a dismissive wave in that panel because it's like behind him shooting. It's really like you said. It's just like the simple fact it just is a gesture shows how much he doesn't even give any thought to this. It's smartly done. It's then yeah. I don't know. I think the art, like you said earlier, the artwork does so much to elevate this to a level that is unbelievable, and like nobody talks about this. And
Yes.
it's weird. There's always
That's a great
a
point.
book. There's always a book, there's always a movie, there's always a TV show, there's always some little like piece of work that insiders know of that the rest of the rest of pop culture or the rest of the fans like didn't really catch on to. Like you see a movie that there's a movie it's called Come and See that's a Russian film that came out in like the early 80s and it takes place in Ukraine actually. And it was this movie that had an impact on Spielberg when he made Saving Private Ryan. It had impact on Robert Deakins when he shot 1917. A few other people have like mentioned it for what it did, and it's kind of interesting that there's always these. I think that Cloak and Dagger falls in this category of a work that the artists are looking at, because you have to think that everyone at Marvel who's on staff there or just the comics industry in general, all the working artists, because it was less than what it is now, they're looking at all the stuff that's on the stands, they're looking at everything that's being published, going, well, who got this job, or how come I didn't get this job. And I think it's interesting with that article about Rick Leonardi where he had these gaps in his career that and he would come up, he'd be out for like 4, 5, 6 months, and then this next thing he dropped was like he'd upped his game in a
Yes,
super strong
yes.
way,
Oh, yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned that article again, because that reminds me, I did want to quote from that, and that's probably a really good place for us to end, is to
Yes.
quote from the Tegan O'Neil article where they are talking about exactly this phenomenon with Rick Leonardi that you mention here. And what Tegan writes is that, you know, of course, Leonardi had done some earlier projects. He'd drawn a little bit of Thor. He'd drawn an Incredible Hulk annual. He did some Daredevil, and he also drew one of the original Vision and the Scarlet Witch miniseries. But he was working with different inkers. You know, he was working with Aiken and Garvey, and he was working with other inkers who were skilled inkers, but they didn't mesh with his style the way that Terry Austin did. So here's Tegan O'Neil talking about what happened with Leonardi going into this Cloak and Dagger series that we discussed. Tegan says, now, if the first gap in the record represents a significant improvement for Leonardi, it really can't be stressed how much the second gap, where Leonardi had gone away for a while, represented not merely a significant improvement, but a creative rebirth in every significant way. Vision and the Scarlet Witch is a well-drawn comic, professional, occasionally interesting, and never less than competent. But Cloak and Dagger is in a completely different ballpark. My question to you is, why the fuck don't we talk about Cloak and Dagger being a goddamn significant book? Amen, Tegan O'Neil. Amen.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I
right,
mean,
right. I mean,
yeah,
amen. And hold on, there's a little more, a little more. But Tegan goes on to say, why the fuck don't we talk about it being a goddamn significant book? Because it is a goddamn significant book. We talk about Michael Golden on Micronauts and Art Adams on Longshot. We talk about Simonson's Thor, books that galvanized the generation of artists who followed immediately after, some of whom would go on to found their own companies, like the Image guys.
yeah.
Uh, but there's something missing from that genealogy, a book for the years in between. Art Adams was then still trying to break in at the time, working at a pizzeria in between early jobs for indie publishers. Longshot is published almost 2 years after the first volume of Cloak and Dagger in June of '85, and it's inconceivable to me that the one could have been created without the significant influence of the other. Okay, so just like we were talking about here, it's
Yeah.
inconceivable to imagine that Arthur Adams wasn't looking at Rick Leonardi and studying his work. Look at all the interesting, inventive, wild stuff that Arthur Adams did in Longshot and find perhaps its closest antecedent in the team of Leonardi and the slightly more experienced hand of Terry Austin. And then Tegan says finally here, regarding Terry Austin and the combination of the two, what Rick Leonardi needed from Austin was to see just how a thin, sinuous line could work on the comics page. And that's getting back to the thing we talked about earlier about Terry Austin actually inking with a crow quill and how that gave him an unusually thin line compared to most inkers at the time in comics. When Leonardi gets that thin line, when Cloak and Dagger #1 hits the stands in '83 and he sees how good his work starts looking when he goes for that clean line, Rick Leonardi is unlocked. As simple as that. He goes from someone capable of drawing a decent comic book to someone incapable of not drawing a striking comic book and drawing it distinctively, a journey of about 3 years. And you can see Leonardi in all the people who came after. Mike Mignola starts for the company in '83, 2 years after Leonardi, follows a similar path from bare competency to mastery, just by refusing to sit and learning how to foreground motion in composition. Wait, what does that even mean? I'm not sure what that means. Anyways,
So yeah. So just real quick, is I just because that's the part I had to read twice. I think it means that as opposed to just sitting on your laurels and just doing what you're doing,
oh,
is that you go,
oh,
oh, like because like foreground motion is this, that's the stuff that we noticed a lot in this book, where it's like the stuff you'd see that would be colored in like the blue wash, like that stuff, like the way they see set up the separations between the foreground, the background, and the middle ground. And I think and that's the thing that like when cinematographers light that way, that's what
yeah,
makes amazing lighting work. And and most artists don't do that. They leave everything in the foreground. Like the hero is usually in the front. He's
right,
not like he's not in the middle ground or the background the way that Leonardi does. And it
right.
gives you more depth. And when you're moving in depth, then you seem like you're moving like it's more dynamic.
Okay. Okay. Well, that makes sense here. That makes sense. Well, I think then, the last thing that Tegan says here in the review that's kind of pertinent to what we're talking about. Um, After the second Cloak and Dagger series, which is the one, of course, that we've just talked about, Rick Leonardi enters a different class of artists. For the space of a couple of years, he bounces between fill-ins for Uncanny X-Men, New Mutants, and Amazing Spider-Man. And so he goes and then he goes on to do all these high-profile books, but never getting a long run on anything. And ultimately, I think that's one of the things about Rick Leonardi's career that perhaps would have resulted in higher visibility is if he ever got to draw something that was like the one evergreen book that we still talk about today with great writing. But he never got that, and frankly, just the artists at Marvel probably had less opportunities to get those kind of evergreen books because Marvel wasn't putting out as many in a certain way like as DC was, frankly. But Leonardi ultimately went on to do Spider-Man 2099, which you mentioned, Chris, one of his more significant runs with Al Williamson. And so he's certainly had a terrific career in all kinds of ways. But I think for us, this Cloak and Dagger Terry Austin work it's such a revelation, and it's really, really worth remembering and celebrating because, as Tegan says, there's no reason that we should not talk about it in the same breath as the visual work that was being done by Simonson and Arthur Adams and others, which people talk about so much. So yeah, so
Well,
all the love to Leonardi and Austin. They killed it. This was insane.
they absolutely killed it. The last thing I'll say, the 2 points that are quick, interesting about you bringing up Simonson, because Simonson's style has got a similar type of like, it's very signature, like Leonardi's is. It's just blockier
Yeah.
than this. There's a sensuality to what Leonardi does, which I think is
Yes.
amazing. I mean, I think to me, I think the only book he really did that had consistently great writing was 2099, but I don't think that book was as popular. I mean, it was written by Peter David, that stuff. So I just don't
Yeah.
think it wasn't the Amazing Spider-Man when Tom McFarlane was doing it.
Yeah.
So just yeah, it's a
Yeah.
bad thing.
I mean, yeah, in the alternate timeline universe where Leonardi maybe went to Image and Image Comics had 9 founders and he was the second oldest guy there along with Jim Valentino, we might be sitting in a world where Rick Leonardi had some creator-owned smash and he was well regarded, as like one of the top guys, I think the way he should be thought of. But, as it is, certainly Leonardi is a transformative, transcendent artist who elevated everything that he's ever worked on. But this Cloak and Dagger second miniseries, I would agree with Tegan, was the breakthrough where things went supernova. I mean, in a positive way. Things just went to a level that was amazing, and that's pretty incredible to see that again and how well it holds up. So, anyways, but thank you everybody for listening to us go on about this book. And if you enjoyed the show, please do remember to hit like and subscribe. Please do remember, for God's sake. I'm tired, Chris. It's been a long day. What else do we got? We got a Patreon. Everybody just get out there and fucking look at the Patreon, for God's sake. We got 3 or 4 bonus episodes up there, and we actually have something incredibly exciting we're going to be announcing soon. So please get in early on that, and jump in the comments if you want to chime in about Cloak and Dagger. We'd love to hear everyone's thoughts.
All right, everyone, thank you for listening, and we will see you hopefully next week.
Yep. Thank you.